Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. It's April 12th. I'm Dennis Kradov. I'm here with Kasper Rosalowski, UFC Poland cast as a Polish Australian. That's a pretty sweet moment for you, isn't it?
It is a pretty sweet moment. And yes, we'll be breaking down UFC Poland, talking about the card, talking about whether it was worth the 6 or 5 or 7 hours of however long it went for.
7 hours, jeez.
We're going to be breaking down the card, mainly the main card, and we're also going to be joined by 3 fantastic guests. We're going to have Jake Ellenberger returning to the program. We're going to be talking to Chris Leben, and the always wonderful and manly Don Frye is coming back for another good time. So it's a really nice show this week.
Yeah, that's right, guys. As always, just a bit of housekeeping and get out of the way. If you are watching on YouTube, give us a subscribe. It's youtube.com/Submission Radio AU, at Submission AUS on Twitter. We love chatting to all the listeners. We always get a whole bunch of zany comments and we answer them personally. Love the interactions with you guys and love hearing your thoughts. And the technique of the week, Cass. So this week we have a flying technique. A lot of positive feedback from this one.
Yeah, flying omoplata. So if you did see, a few weeks ago, we had an omoplata variation done by David Union of Australian Elite Team. And now David Union is doing a flying omoplata. So definitely give that one a check out. Technique of the Week every Wednesday. That's when it comes out. That's Wednesday Australian time. So the Yanks, the lucky Yanks, they get it around about Tuesday morning, I believe. So that's something to check out. We've got plenty more techniques coming. And yeah, like you said, Dennis, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, give us some comments. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about UFC Poland. That's what we're going to be breaking down. That's what the subject is going to be this week. So let us know what you think about UFC Poland. I think without further ado, let's just get cracking. I believe our first guest is on the line. And Dennis, I believe you are going to do the introduction.
Our next guest is a UFC legend who's arguably one of the toughest fighters to step foot into the UFC octagon. He's now a host on Unfiltered MMA Radio on ESPN every Monday and has his autobiography, The Crippler, Cage Fighting and My Life on the Edge, set to come out early next year. Chris Leben, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Oh, right on, man. Thanks for having me.
You know, Chris, it's our pleasure. It's great to have you back on. And obviously lots has changed since the last time we spoke. Like we mentioned, you're now doing an awesome job hosting MMA radio. How do you enjoy being on the other side of the coin?
You know what? I'm honestly, I love it because, you know, like I tell people all the time, you know, the only thing faster in my hands is my mouth. So, you know, I don't mind, you know, getting paid just to talk shit. It's not too bad of a deal, you know. I could, you know, I could always end up having a real job, which would be terrible. The show's been great. You know, we've had different guests. You know, we've been on, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, you know, and we've had different guests every show. And now it's gotten to the point where, you know, even fighters and different people are reaching out to us already. So, you know, ratings are through the roof. Show's going great. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Don't take any of our listeners anytime too soon, Chris. Now, it's crazy. It's crazy for us to say this because time just flies by so quickly. But just a number of days ago, it was actually the 10-year anniversary of the iconic Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin Tough One finale. Now, obviously, you were a big part of that first season. Looking back on it all, are you amazed at how much it's meant for MMA fans, the first season of Tough, and how much it's done for MMA? And did you realize that you'd be such a big part of history when you first stepped into that Tough house?
Oof, man, that's a big question. You know, obviously hindsight's 2020. But you know, at the time, you know, I was living in the moment. You know what I mean? I just, you know, we didn't even know, you know, how the show was going to do or anything, and then it aired. It was a huge success, you know, and you know, it was kind of just a wild ride, you know. But looking back, you know, obviously, yeah, man, without the Ultimate Fighter, without that first season, I truly don't believe that, you know, Dana White, the Petitas, the UFC would be where it's at today, or even close to it.
You know, obviously, The Ultimate Fighter Season 1, and it's been in the history books for a while now, and obviously you're saying it was a bit of a wild ride, but, you know, now that we've been able to see the seasons, we sort of know what to expect, but you guys were the original cast. Leading up into that house, you know, what was going through your mind, you know, when it first started, when you first sort of, you know, before you even entered the house, you know, did you expect what was going to happen?
You know, I had no clue. You know, I was a, you know, 22, 23-year-old kid. You know what I mean? And, you know, honestly, we didn't even know if the show was going to air or not. You know, it wasn't like we had Burger King as a sponsor and Gillette razors. And, you know, I mean, the show wasn't established in any way, so it was, nobody really knew, what was going on or what to expect. And I think even they changed the format on us a couple times as the show progressed, and it was just really, we were in uncharted territory.
Yeah, no, it was certainly a very special season. Now, Chris, Chuck Mindenhall actually recently published a fantastic article on Jason Thacker, more commonly known as Strange Brew. His story is a bit of a sad one, and his UFC career was pretty much over in an instant. When you were on The Ultimate Fighter with him, did you feel like he was a sacrificial lamb and that he was there to be made an example of by the more experienced fighters?
Yeah, it kind of sucks. I mean, I took a look at the article. We talked about it on my show. And truthfully, he wasn't at the level of the rest of the guys on the show. You know what I mean? They brought him in as reality shows. They like to have those contrasting characters. You know what I'm saying? So, I think in a lot of ways, yeah, he was a sacrificial lamb. But looking at the article and stuff, older, I hope a little more wiser, a little more experienced, yeah, I know I was a little bit of a dickhead on the show, but I just really appreciated that, he doesn't have any resentments, his life is where it's at, and he's fully accepted it, and he doesn't hold anything against anybody that was on the show, me in particular, which just makes me go, man, what a real person, what a stand-up guy,
Yeah, and that's a very positive part about it. It's very admirable. In that same article, I'm sure you read, Thacker explained how after the show, because of how, badly he did, he would regularly get beat up in bars by groups of guys, MMA fighters. What are your thoughts on that? Would you ever expect MMA fans or fighters to do things like that?
No, not at all, man. It's stupid, I mean, yeah, it's God, it's a tough deal, but it's a cutthroat world, Yeah, I must have. We talked about the article on the show, but I must have missed that part. I mean, Canada's a little crazy too. It's its own beast, So there's the fans in Canada for some reason are just they're just over the top, man. They love the sport, But that's I might have peed on his bed, but I certainly wouldn't have beat him up.
Yeah.
That being said, if any of your listeners, he's got that. Jason Thacker didn't do it, but I know the guy that wrote the article set up that GoFundMe account. Because I guess his parents aren't doing the best. He's trying to take care of both of them. So if anybody's listening wants to send him a couple bucks and help the guy out, man, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually believe it closed yesterday, and they raised pretty much the whole $13,000 they were aiming to raise.
Did? Okay.
So
Wow.
it's awesome. Yeah, it's great to see. Now, speaking of Tough One, not many fighters from the first season are still active. Just wondering, have you had a chance to watch Josh Koscheck's last two fights or last few fights, and what did you think? Because for a lot of, obviously, MMA journalists, the common opinion is Josh may be sticking around for a bit too long.
Man, the sport has progressed so much. Josh came in as a natural athlete and an amazing wrestler, and he was able to do so much in the sport. That being said, he's got his clothing line. He's got a lot of stuff going for him. Yeah, what else does he have to prove? Let it go. I mean, there comes a point in everybody's life when you got to say, I think I've proven everything I can, and I've pushed it as far as I can go. And in my opinion, it's better to burn out than fade away.
The first few Ultimate Fighters have been, they were really awesome. They're all classic. I'd say probably maybe the first 10 seasons. However, some of the more recent ones have been a bit average, and it seems MMA fans may be a little bit over it. Why do you think the decline in people caring about Ultimate Fighter has occurred?
Well, I think, one, you have to remember, that first season, everybody, excluding of course Jason Thacker, was at a competition, was at a level to where we were already knocking on the UFC's door. I mean, and it's hard kind of for them to go out and find top level fighters like that, and enough to fill a house, a couple seasons a year, so there's that. And then also I think because now, the characters that we did have on the original show, and none of us knew what we were in for, and I think now some of these kids that are going on to the Ultimate Fighter have been raised on the Ultimate Fighter, and so they kind of they know what's asked of them, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to act. And unfortunately, when you know what's expected and you know what people want, you just don't do as good of a job, I think, as when you're being creative and being your own individual.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to see another comebacks series for Tough. I think that would be awesome, especially with all the people always getting cut. There'd be a lot of great names. Now, Chris, recently another MMA legend in Mark Coleman was in a very difficult situation. I know you probably read about it with his health. We actually had him on the show a number of weeks ago to promote his GoFundMe account. My question to you is, do you think that legends such as The Hammer, who have given so much to companies like the UFC, should be afforded some sort of pension for these difficult situations that really sort of, I suppose, threaten their health, and this money is really, for them to live their life after the UFC?
Absolutely, I think so. I know that I'll just go ahead and say, a life in fighting is not your average career. And sure, none of us are going to have, 25 years in the UFC and then retire. But, even these guys that change the sport, or, in my case, and a lot of the other guys off the original Ultimate Fighter, we spent nearly a decade in the sport. You sacrifice a lot. We all gave a lot. And without these people, Mark Coleman, for example, man, without that guy, what would the sport be? That guy was one of the founders, one of the people that made the sport, and now that the sport is doing so well, I really don't understand why there wouldn't be.
And fighter pay is a topic that has been brought up again in the news recently, and I was actually discussing the topic with a colleague recently, about locker room bonuses and the amount that fighters are paid, and, even in the biggest organizations, and how many of them are ending up with, not really that much. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, do you think that a fighter, let's say, for example, an average top 15 fighter in the UFC could retire off of a 10-year career?
That's a tough one, man, because honestly, Koscheck, for example, just did an amazing job with his money.
Yeah.
The rest of us, I can't say the same for myself. But ultimately, I was talking to Chael Sonnen when I did his podcast about it, and it's, people don't realize, they say, oh, he made 50 or 80 grand for this fight. Well, out of that 50 or 80 grand, once you take your coaches, your gym, taxes, a fighter's lucky to end up with 40% of it. I mean, honestly, and then he's got to pay for his food, his nutrition, his, everything in life out of that. And when you're doing that, it's hard to put away. It's also, as a fighter, when you step into the cage, usually you get X to show, double that to win, and maybe a bonus. That makes it quite hard to balance your checkbook.
Yeah, certainly right, Chris. Now, I just want to go back into your career. A highlight in your career was the awesome finish of Wanderlei Silva at UFC 132. You obviously spoke to us about how much of a fan of Silva you were. Just take us back into that moment. What was going through your mind when you were doing the stare down with the infamous Wanderlei Silva, especially as a fan, and then take us into the moment when you knocked him out. It must have been a surreal feeling.
I was scared to death. I remember in particular, one of the great things was, that fear really motivated me through the entire training camp. And then I remember at weigh-ins, he kind of gave me a smirk, almost like he just like he didn't have respect, like I didn't deserve to be stepping into the ring with him. And in my case, that really fired me up going into the fight. So, obviously, I came out, then they killed the lights. They played his legendary song, of course, and there's no way to really describe to people how much stimulation is going on at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like you're overstimulated. Like there's no way to explain it. It's like it's a sold out house. I'm fighting my legend, my hero. It's for me it was surreal. I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, we're getting goosebumps just listening to it. Vanderlei, he's going through some tough times now. He seems to be stuck in the UFC, and he doesn't look like he'll likely fight again due to avoiding that drug test out of competition. What are your thoughts on this situation?
Once again, man, the guy's got a great gym. He's got kids in the sport. He's there's so much that he can offer the world. Post career. I don't see why he needs to fight again, honestly, I mean, who doesn't want to take a Vanderlei Silva seminar? You know what I'm saying? Who doesn't want to learn from that guy or train at his gym? I wish some of these guys would realize that, you don't have to you can't define yourself as being a fighter your entire life. I mean, it's a phase, and everything in this life is finite, and that's something that I've had to come to grips with, is that, we all grow old, and then eventually, we all die, and that our fighting career is a very short window in our lifespan.
Yes.
So, you really have to focus on what's next, and I think for him that should be his goal, is to focus on what's next, because obviously there's even if he did fight, how many more fights would he have, and that, that being said, what's he going to do after he is done?
Yeah, and it's good because he's actually advocating for a lot of fighters. He's been on the show a number of times, so hopefully we see more from him in the future. Now, while on the subject of drug tests, you obviously had an infamous fight with Anderson Silva. It was a bit quick. It was still a very interesting fight. Now Anderson is in the headlines, obviously for testing positive for steroids. Just wondering, what did you think when you heard the news?
I was blown away. Really, I was. Anderson's, such a, natural athlete and everything else. But I mean, I can understand coming off an injury like that, and with his age and where he's at. That being said, God, I know I sound like a broken record, but I mean, if he would have just went out and retired on, after breaking his leg and everything else, and said, look, this is a catastrophic injury. I was the best fighter of all time. The world was his oyster at that point, and God, I know I fucked up, but it's definitely a little bit damaging to his legacy, I guess, and and I know he's one of the nicest guys, every time he's so respectful, he's great, and and I understand what it is to want to still compete and to want to try to keep your body healthy. But that was I guess in particular, getting caught was a big fuck up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Everybody kind of always looked at me one way, but in the world's eyes, Anderson Silva was just a whole nother beast. And that really did a lot more damage, I think, than if somebody like me were to get caught.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Chris, as we mentioned in the intro, your book looks set to be released. You have so many awesome stories. Was it difficult for you to sit down and get this stuff on paper? And what was the process like for you?
It was really hard. Luckily, I've got a great ghostwriter, Daniel Padikin, and just somebody that actually, he's been through his own struggles. So I was able to relate to him. And I think without that, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish what we accomplished on the book, because I really, really tried to keep it as real and as raw as possible. I really want people to see, what was really going on. I tried to candy coat it. Obviously there's some some names and stuff that I can't really throw out there because those people still have a lot going on in their lives and this and that. You know, that being said, you know, Daniel was great to work with. In a lot of aspects, it was therapeutic because, you know, I had to go over and kind of come to terms with a lot of stuff that I had more or less suppressed, you know, and writing the book really helped me realize how much I have grown, you know, because, you know, those, you know, right, the first few years, you know, you know, story after story, you know, I like to think of myself as a good person, but I'm going, fuck, man, I'm a dick. Like, you know, when I'm going back and I'm reading this stuff, you know, and then I had to come to terms with, well, hey, Chris, look, this is where you came from. This is what you went through, and this is where you are now, you know. And I mean, even now, don't get me wrong, I'm far from a normal person, you know. I still have, you know, I work my ass off, you know. I'm at Victory MMA and Fitness, the biggest gym in San Diego, and I've got an amazing fight team. 29-3, by the way, since I've been coaching there.
Wow.
You know, and then, you know, the book, the radio show, you know, I've got all this stuff going, you know. So it's really good for me to be able to realize how much progression I have made, even though, you know, in America, for some reason, we seem to think, you know, once you turn 18 years old, you're an adult, you know, and then there's no more maturing. Well, you know, I've really realized that I'm going to continue to mature and grow my entire life.
Yeah, and that's a great way of looking at it, Chris. I think a lot of us are coming to that realization as well. Now, we know there are a lot of crazy stories that people want to buy the book for, but just as a little taste, as a little preview for the fans listening right now, can you share a little bit of one crazy Chris Leben story from the book to get the fans excited and go and pre-order it now?
And just to let you know, Chris, you've already told us the Brian Stan story of what happened before the Brian Stan fight.
So we want a new one.
Okay. Well, what about the Cote one was what sold the writer on writing the book?
Yeah, tell us that one. We don't know.
Okay, well, you know, he called me and he wasn't sure if he wanted to write it, you know, and I just gave him an idea, you know. So basically, you know, before I fought Patrick Cote, like the day before weigh-ins, I go out. My brother works in Vegas. He works in one of those. They sell the foot-long margaritas. Anyways, I get blackout drunk. I'm hanging out with these Irish guys. I end up going into the bathroom at the Hard Rock and kicking every bathroom stall down. At which point security arrests me. Security guard standing there. The Irish guys are going, do you know who this guy is? I give the guy every penny in my pocket, bribe him like $500 or whatever. To let me out of the handcuffs. Lets me out of the handcuffs. I run to my room. Next morning, I wake up in a pile of vomit. I think it's 8 in the morning because I set my old cell phone at the time, the alarm. So I think it's 8 in the morning. It's actually freaking noon. I'm 2 hours late for my photo shoot. You know, I call my ex. She's going, yeah, I went to the gym, I did this, I did that. I'm going, wow, before 8 in the morning? And then she says, what, you know, what do you mean it's noon? And I was like, oh, yeah, I know that, you know. And so then I remember I'd go down and do my photo shoot, and the lady saying she smells alcohol somewhere, and ended up getting through that. Obviously, I couldn't eat or drink now because it was time to make weight. So I had to cut weight, completely hungover, and fought Patrick Cote. And I don't know if you guys remember that fight, but that was it was just a war.
Wow. Now, Chris, we're going to finish off the interview with a thing we like to call the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. Basically, a bunch of fun questions to go through and just to sort of have a bit of fun. So are you ready?
I remember this. All right, let's see how I do.
All right, here we go. Now, first question, how's the body feeling for the Crippler right now?
You know, as long as I take care of it, it's okay. But if I'm not eating right or not getting my sleep and my rest, you know, it hurts. I've got aches and pains that I know are never going to go away.
Now we've got the fans' help in this tap out round. So some of the fan ones, right? The Brown Ranger wants to know, why did you paint your hair red?
You know, years ago, it was, you know, I started doing the hair and the nails. I think my first fight, or my first two fights, it was actually bleach blonde. But, you know, I figured, fuck, man, I need a way for these promoters to recognize me. So that's really what it was about. It was about getting people to remember me.
Now, this one's from a fan called Blunt Force Trauma. He goes, I heard Carla Alexander called you out at a party or a club when you were in Oahu. Oahu, can you tell us about what happened?
Which guy?
Carla Alexander, I believe he's a surfer, a famous surfer over there in Hawaii.
Oh, Carla. Yeah, you know, it's funny, actually, man. Me and Carla are boys. I don't know if you know his name. I don't know if you guys know who he is, or how much I can really say. But, you know, let's just say, you know, I trained him because somebody called me and asked me to, and I couldn't refuse him. And then, you know, he did call me out. He does have a little bit of a short temper, or more or less, we had some words. But a week later, I was in the hospital sitting next to him taking pictures with a dozen kids with cancer for his charity. So
Wow.
just another one of those guys that's like, you know, it's fighters, you know, big heart, great guy. Just there's a lot of personality in that guy. Let's just put it that way. He's a good guy, but there's a lot of personality in him.
Now, Chris, in your fighting days, you could take a lot of punches. Did people ever bring up the episode of The Simpsons where Homer has a helmet like Skull and takes on Drederick Tatum to describe your toughness?
No, actually, I never heard that one, but it's pretty good.
Now, this next question's from Hot Rhythm. He'd like to know, can you share some unheard stories of training from back in your Team Quest days in Oregon, or any kind of stuff that went on in the camp that fans would have never heard of?
God, man, it's, you know, back then we just did not know how to train. I mean, you know, obviously Randy and Matt Lindland were running the practices, and when you train wrestling, you train 100%. You know, so you know, we were training 100% with 4-ounce gloves on, and back then it was the old, you know, the only gloves we had were like the Century ones or the Billy Blanks ones where you had to cut the bar out of the bottom, you know. But I mean, you can just imagine, you know, guys getting knocked out every day, and just, you know, we drag them up to the side, they'd wake up and start training again. You know, now I realize as a coach, like, God, a kid gets knocked out, he's done for the day. It wasn't like that at Team Quest.
Wow.
You get knocked out, as soon as you're good to move around again, you were back in there doing rounds, you know. And then, of course, you know, me and Ed Herman, you know, he started about a month or two after me at Team Quest, you know, so we were always best friends / worst rivals, you know, our entire career. So there was a lot of fuck yous, and a lot of rounds that turned a little more real.
Wow. Now, Chris, we've seen that you've been doing some auditions. Can we expect to see the Crippler in any movies in 2015?
Well, actually, I'm in a great documentary by a guy named Chris Bell, which is coming out. I don't know if you guys saw it. He did the Bigger, Faster, Stronger documentary.
Ah, yep.
He did that one. Well, his next one is called Prescription Thugs, talking about prescription pain abuse or pain pill abuse and professional athletes. You know, I'm really excited to be in this documentary because I just hope that, you know, it really gets the point across. And I love the way Chris does stuff. You know, he presents the truth behind issues. He doesn't candy cone it or paint it the way the media wants to look at it. You know, he lets you know the facts, and some people like it, some people hate it. That being said, I'm also on the Kingdom program, you know, with starring one of the Jonas Brothers.
Yep.
I did a couple episodes for them, you know, and I know they got a bunch more funded, so I'm hoping to get some more parts in there. You know, other than that, you know, I've read for a few things, you know, but you know, I've got you know, my coaching, my radio show, everything else. Acting for me is like I really enjoy it. I kind of feel like I've been lying to people my whole life, so I should be a pretty good actor right now.
Well, you actually reminded me. You played the guy in Kingdom that wouldn't pay his gym membership, didn't you?
Yeah.
Chris, what's going on? That's just what's going on. And they were chasing you around for it. I'm like, do you guys know who this guy is? He will knock Nick Jonas out in a second.
Well, it was funny, you know, because I'm playing a broke MMA fighter. You know, it's not exactly that far outside the box. What I'm saying. So, but actually, really fun to do that show. It's great. I'll be honest, man. It's a lot easier to do acting and fake hit people than it is to fight in the UFC and you get paid.
Well, you get different fighters saying different things. Royce Gracie was saying how hard it was for him to act as opposed to just getting in there and fighting. But, you know, finally, for fans excited about your book, describe it to them in a few words why they can't miss this one, Chris.
This isn't a book about an MMA fighter. This is a book about just a fucking crazy life and just a struggle and just so much just different stuff. Like, I can't ever even explain why every time in my life, my whole life, just crazy things happen to me, regardless of if it's in the cage or outside of the cage, you know. There's just never been a dull moment in my life. And I mean, sometimes fact is more crazy than fiction. And I'm telling you, if you read this book, you're gonna be blown away. Like, you know, I'm hoping people go, wow, he went through that, he did that. That's way more amazing than any of those punches I saw him take and not get knocked out.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a very, very interesting book. We won't miss it. Guys, check out Chris on Twitter at Crippler UFC. Pre-order The Crippler: Cage Fighting and My Life on the Edge on Amazon now. And make sure to listen to him every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. PST on ESPN Unfiltered MMA Radio. Chris, it's been a pleasure, and it's great to see that you got so many great projects.
And, they can just go to unfilteredmma.com and watch any of the past episodes. You know, check it out, man. And I appreciate it. Thank you guys for letting me be on. You know, always love your show. So, right on.
Hi, this is Stephan Bonner, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is an MMA legend. We've had him on the show previously a number of times. He's a legend in the UFC, a legend in Pride, one of the toughest SOBs to ever step foot in an octagon or a cage of any type. And he also arguably has the best mustache in the sport. We have none other than Don Frye on Submission Radio. Don, it's so good to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's always good to have me, isn't it? It's the brightest part of your day.
The pleasure is definitely all ours. You know, Don, you're a busy man in Hollywood, and we want to talk about some of your upcoming projects. You know, you're always doing a new movie or a show. One of your upcoming movies is called Chuck, Hank, and the San Diego Twins. You play a character called Diggsy. Now, Diggsy doesn't sound like the name of a typical Don Frye character. Tell us about the movie and about the role.
It's the movie is about two rival gangs, an older gang and the younger gang that has the town tore up, you know, split up, and the younger gang's trying to take over the old troop. And, you know, obviously I'm one of the older guys of the old gang and try to protect the territory. And we have a run in. You know, obviously it's a lot of fun. It's a hell of a movie. You got David Arquette, you got Mike Perret. You know, Mike was Eddie from Eddie and the Cruisers, and did a bunch of other things. And Josh Barnett's in it, and shit, it's a good lineup. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. You're also in a film called Any Which Way They Come. This one, we believe, is still being filmed. How is the project going, and which way are they really coming from?
You know, brother, I don't know. Somebody dropped the ball on that one, and my scene got delayed to be reshot, and they never called me back. So
what?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I got forgot or they just decided they didn't want to use me. But you know, I'm sitting here all by myself.
That's
right. That one's banned. All the Submission Radio listeners not allowed to watch that movie.
That's disgraceful. You know, Don.
Yeah, lost star. Lost the star. The best performance in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we've been watching a lot of Entourage recently. I don't know how much of Entourage you watch. It's a great show. And Hollywood life seems pretty fun, from the parties, the groupies, the sweet catering, to the awesome trailers. You know, what's one of the biggest perks for you being an actor?
Oh, heck. I get to hide from my wife. You know, she's over there in Arizona. She's in Arizona and I'm here, and I'd have to disconnect the phone every now and then. But besides that, I'm safe.
Yeah, well, that's the secret to a happy marriage, a bit of distance. Now, speaking of old connections and old adversaries, Ken Shamrock, someone that you've obviously had a really good history with, has been in the news of late. What do you think about this fight that he's about to have with Kimbo Slice?
I think it's fantastic. I'm looking forward to it, I got a lot of respect for Ken. You can't fight somebody for 20 minutes and not bury the hatchet, or there's something wrong with you. And Ken and I had a hell of a fight a decade ago, and I've seen him several times since then. And we've talked, and I'm just getting myself in shape just in case Ken gets hurt and pulls out, and then I'll step in his place and fight Kimbo.
There you go. Wouldn't even miss a heartbeat. Just curious. We never did get your opinion. What do you think of Kimbo as a fighter? And him as an opponent for Ken Shamrock.
I think it'll be a great fight. I'm impressed with Kimbo. Kimbo hits hard, and seems to be a smart fighter. He's got a tough chin, and he's got a good right and a good left hook, and he's not afraid. Kimbo comes to fight, which is more than what you can say for 99% of the other fighters out there. Kimbo's a man.
Yeah, well, and he certainly has, that whole fan base that love watching his fights. Now, Ken was on our show last week, actually, and he was talking about bringing a bare-knuckle boxing event to pay-per-view later on this year. What do you think about Ken fighting the undefeated bare-knuckle boxer James Quinn in the pay-per-view?
Well, that'd be great, man. I'd pay to watch it, Ken's smart enough to fight bare knuckle. When you fight bare knuckle, it's a completely different fighting style than fighting with gloves. And that was my problem. I was never smart enough to fight without gloves, because I always hit hard. I broke my hands with gloves and without. So, Ken's smart enough to dial back ratchet back the pain, the power.
Yeah, certainly. And, you just mentioned how obviously you've had some bare-knuckle experience. It certainly sounds like a sport that Don Frye would have been interested in back in his prime. Is that something that you think can grow into a sport, and is that a sport that you would have competed in if it was as big as MMA back in the day?
I don't know, because like I said, I'm not smart enough to hold back the power, You got to be able to gauge it. And I just hit too doggone hard. That's the problem. I got doubled up with the padding when I hit the bag. I'm just not a smart guy when it comes to throwing punches.
Now, you spoke to us last time about how disappointing it was, watching Stephan Bonner's fight with Tito Ortiz in the Bellator main event.
My God.
Now, I want to bring that up, but, given that you've got Ken Shamrock and Kimbo Slice in the main event, do you think there's any element of possibly making it a mistake, putting two guys who, may be a little bit out of their primes and may not be able to live up to the expectations of fans due to being a little bit older?
No, I think, Ken always brings it and Kimbo always brings it. And, those two guys are smart enough to know that potentially this could be the last fight. Back when I was fighting, every fight was potentially your last fight. So you always looked at it that way. You went in there loaded for bear, and you left nothing. You left nothing in the ring or in the cage. So I think Kimbo and Ken are both smart enough to understand that.
Now, speaking of MMA legends such as yourself, Mark Coleman was recently in a bit of strife with an injury that he had with his hip. Obviously, you and Mark have a history there as well. What did you think when you saw Mark in the difficult position? Obviously, the fans helped him pay his surgery. Do you think legends like Mark, who have given so much to the UFC, deserve to have some kind of pension there for these kinds of occurrences where you need your surgeries and all the other things that come after fighting in the UFC?
you know, God bless the fans, man. I'm glad they stepped up and they took care of Mark. And, you know, it's nothing's owed to us. All right, we're adults. We read the contract. We knew what we were getting into. But for these dipshit promoters come along behind it and still use your fight films and use your name and your image to make money off of it and not give you a penny, that's a bunch of horseshit. You know, that just shows what kind of a scumbag they are.
Let's talk about you, Don. You know, give us the update. How is your back feeling? You know, you spoke last time about, you know, having back surgeries and your disc protruding. How's the back feeling right now? Is it feeling any better? And does it allow you the opportunity to still get into the gym and train?
Yeah, Chet Congo showed up, and I've been working out over here at a gym in Calabasas. Chet Congo showed up with this machine that's called WinBack, W-I-N, back. And it shoots electric current into your body. You lay on the negative side pad, and to ground you out, because sometimes you lifted it up a couple of times and the current's got a little strong. Kind of shocked me, I was like, man, I thought he was doing it on purpose because he's Muslim, He tortured me, asked me questions. And, I felt fantastic. I haven't felt this good in 15 freaking years, man. I got up, and everybody there, they said, shit, Don, we didn't know you were that tall. Because I could stand up straight. I was so happy with it, man. And right now, Chet Congo's number one person on my Christmas list or holiday list, whatever the heck the Muslims celebrate. I'll send him a card.
Well, that's a bit disappointing. Means we get pushed down the list even further.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this is a question that fans are going to keep asking, and we're just going to ask it because they always send it in whenever you come on the show. Do you think there's any possibility you would ever step into a fight again in the future?
Well, yeah, that's what I said. I threw my hat in the ring. If Ken gets hurt and has to step out, then I'm here. I'll step in the cage to challenge Kimbo. I think it'd be a great fight, Kimbo and myself.
Well, hopefully Scott Coker's listening. Don, we've spoken a lot about your historic career in our previous interviews with you last year. We wanted to ask you about your first UFC, though. UFC, it was UFC 8. It was in Puerto Rico. That must have been a pretty crazy experience having to go out in the country, fight for the first time. Do you have any stories you can share from your time in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, it was really upsetting because I just started dating. Well, I had dated Molly. I'd met her right before New Year's Eve over down there in Sierra Vista at the gym. And she said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a fighter. She said, you making money doing that? I said, oh, yeah. And I went off. I didn't because nobody was paying me at the time. They all had short arms when it comes to pay. But I went off to Kellogg, Battle Creek, Michigan, in the Kellogg Arena, and I won a World Heavyweight Shoot Fighting Championship. And I came back, and I met her at the gym. I said, hey, aren't you asking how you did? And she said, what the hell did he do? Who is this guy? She said, yeah, what the hell did you do? I said, I won, and, so then we started dating, and, I got to Puerto Rico, and I called up my parents. I said, hey, can you loan me $600 to bring this gal down to Puerto Rico? And I decided in love with her, man. I fell in love with her first thing. Still wait for her to have those same feelings for me, after 20 years. Eventually, maybe. But she flew down there, and seeing that beautiful woman in the bright yellow bikini running up and down that beach is the best part of it. When I walked in there and I walked in that hot, sweaty arena, man, it was just brutal. And I tell you what, boy, it had to be 125 degrees in there, 100% humidity. And it's sweating like a faggot eating a corn dog, And, man, when I knocked that guy out, I thought, man, I better get the hell out of here. Everybody be mad at me.
Well, now we know why you knocked him out in about, 20, 30 seconds. I'm just wondering, because the guy you fought, Thomas Ramirez, he was only 6'1", but he was like 400 pounds. That was obviously a UFC debut. What went through your mind when you saw this giant standing across from you?
Man, my ex-wife used to get on my ass about me and my get-rich-quick schemes. And I looked at that guy and I said, yeah, me and my wild-eyed get-rich-quick schemes really did it this time, Big John McCarthy came over and says, you got any questions? I said, yeah, if I fall down, don't let that guy eat me.
Oh, man, what a classic moment in MMA history. Now, Don, we've missed seeing some of your Predators predictions. So back by popular demand, we've got a few fights that we'd like you to predict. The first one, John Jones versus the hard-hitting Anthony Rumble Johnson at UFC 187. Who do you think wins that fight?
When UFC are we on right now? When is that fight?
UFC 187. So UFC 186 basically just happened over the weekend, and then UFC 187 is the next one. So I want to say, I don't have the dates in front of me, but I want to say July.
Well, you got to go with John Jones. I wonder if he's clean now. What does fit and what do you do? Go do 2 hours in rehab and pull it out? Yeah. Heck, he got the fastest recovery of anybody I ever heard of. So, the thing with the UFC, they test these guys and they come back positive, and then they put the result on the shelf, for a month or two after the fight comes out, and then they decide they'll expose it, So it's all going to depend on how he tests, and whether they're mad at him about the test.
Well, believe it or not, Chael Sonnen believes that the fight is not going to happen. So we'll see if it actually does, or if Chael Sonnen is just saying things to sort of get in the news. We've got another prediction for you.
Why does Chael think it's not going to happen?
I don't know. He did a Reddit Ask Me Anything, and the fans asked him who he thought is going to win, and he said that fight is not going to happen. And then someone else asked him, again, and he just said, mark my words, that fight will not happen. But he didn't give a reason. He refused to. So either Chael knows something that we don't, or he's just saying things.
Yeah. Maybe John's in jail right now, huh?
Hey, well, it'd only be a one-day stint, so, it's probably all over.
Is Chael training to step in the cage and take the place of the fighter?
Well, you never know. You never know. Let's get another prediction. This is like the Ivan Drago versus Clint Eastwood of modern times. The Russian Sambo master Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone, also at UFC 187. Who do you think's going over?
I gotta go with the Cowboy, partner. I gotta go with the Cowboy. Anybody who wears a hat almost as good as me, which Donald Cerrone pulls off. I'm a fan of the Cowboy, and I think he's gonna ride in and he's gonna drill that boy with some holes. 45 holes. He's gonna ride out with the victory.
Now, the next one is obviously the champ that's been away for a while, Cain Velasquez, one of your fellow Pride veterans, Fabricio Verdum at UFC 188. Do you think Fabricio could beat Cain and become the new champion, or do you think Cain's going to defend his title finally?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go back to the Chael Sonnen answer, and I'm going to steal his quote. This fight's never going to happen. Okay?
Wow.
Why?
Cain will get hurt between now and then. Cain's not even good for 25 minutes a year. So he'll end up getting hurt between now and then. Trust me.
Well,
sorry to interject, Cass. What do you think of Cain Velasquez as a champion, Don? Obviously, you've been around some of the greats in MMA. What do you think about him as a champion?
Has he defended the title?
I believe once. Once or twice. If he does it 3 times, he'll break the record.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. So, who did he beat for it?
He beat Junior Dos Santos, and then he beat also Bigfoot Silva.
Okay. Who?
Bigfoot Silva.
Oh, Bigfoot. Oh, yeah. Oh, shit. Those are good fighters. Those guys are great fighters. I gotta give him credit. I mean, he won the title from that big fairy, that big blonde fairy, right? Pro wrestler. Whatever.
Yes. Brock Lesnar, the one. Yes.
Yeah. Right. That's what that guy. That's not bragging, right? But Yeah, to fight those two guys, they're good fighters. But I think he shot his wad. I hope he saved his money because I don't think he's done.
I hope to see Cain Velasquez back. I'm sure the fight will happen, Don. Another prediction. This one is probably one of the biggest fights of the year. Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor at UFC 189. I don't know if you've been following, all the crazy drama, but who do you think wins this one, Don?
I'm going to go with my fellow white man, Since everybody just white and black are racist today, I'm going to pull out my race card and go with the crazy Nick. He's in Jose Aldo's mind, and poor Jose doesn't know whether to shit or go blind.
Well, speaking of the guy, he's got a pretty exuberant personality. He's done some crazy things to build up his fight. Lots of trash talk, knocks guys out. What do you think of the guy? Do you enjoy watching Conor McGregor, and what do you think about his whole show, the whole Conor McGregor show?
Yeah, I think they used to have a reality TV show. Some guy would follow around that crazy actor. Who was it? That crazy actor with those big teeth. It was called I'm with Juicy,
Oh, yeah.
Gary Busey.
Yeah.
That's pretty much just getting Cameron. So I'm with Conor. Conor's like Gary Busey, man. Please. You don't know where this guy's coming from.
Yeah, well, they both say a lot of entertaining things. Just another thing we wanted to get your thoughts on, Don. Last time we spoke to you, we got obviously some of your predictions for fights such as John Jones and Daniel Cormier and Anderson Silva versus Nick Diaz. Now, you predicted Nick to win the fight. That obviously didn't happen, but the thing that almost nobody else could have predicted was Anderson Silva testing positive for steroids. You spoke about the relationship you guys had in Pride, or, just more the fact about how he was a nice guy, polite guy. What were your thoughts when you heard that Anderson Silva had tested positive for steroids?
You know what? Big deal. Obviously, he needed him to recover and help the recovery process. That is a major injury. Without those steroids, it would have been impossible to come back. Get the guy a break. He had a broken leg. He almost sent his foot flying off in the fifth row. Crime at it. He came back with something really nasty, so he used some steroids to help strengthen his body. It's something that needs to be done more of. If we weren't so goddamn stupid, in Congress and would learn stuff. Well, we don't take time to learn things and understand things through our research. We just say, "Oh, this is bad," so that's it. This thing's evil. This is an evil milk carton, and this milk carton causes cancer, and it's all the milk carton's fault, and you're blaming an inanimate object, for evil actions, and criminy. He needs it, give the guy a break. He's a world champion. He's one of the best fighters the planet has ever seen, and Nick Diaz didn't whine about it. Ask the opponent how they feel. I'll guarantee you, Nick Diaz doesn't give a shit.
Yeah. Now, it's certainly something that's a big hot topic with MMA fans right now. Speaking of hot topics with MMA fans, Don, we have some fan questions for you. The fans heard that you were coming on the show, and as always, we got a whole bunch of questions, but we only chose a few because we know you don't have much time. First question comes from username Armbar King. He goes, Don, you're a man's man, and a man such as yourself, have you ever been nervous before any one of your fights? And if so, which one?
That's a good question. I can't remember if I was. I can't remember. I'm sure I have, but I know I was. No, can't say I was. No.
Okay,
sorry, disappoint you.
Guess that's a no. Got another question from Mustache Power. Mustache Power wants to know, Don, do you believe Brock Lesnar made the right decision recently when he retired from MMA and decided to stay in the WWE?
Yes, I do. And I congratulate Brock Lesnar for making the correct decision. And I will not say anything negative about the man anymore because, he respected the part of my sport enough to stay out of it and stay in his entertainment industry. So I think he did the correct decision.
Now, this next question comes from Rude Nick. He wants to know, Don, you've had a lot of finishes in your career. What did you enjoy more, submitting or knocking out your opponents out cold? And could you give me your favorite finish out of all of your fights?
I always like submitting people because, it's much more satisfying to have total domination over somebody and have to scream and yell uncle, rather than just knocking them out. You knock them out, it basically gives them the easy way out of the fight. But you submit somebody, they have to make a split-second decision that you're ultimately a better man than they are, and they have to sit there and grovel for submission. Grovel for you to release them so that they can live.
Now, Don, we've got one more fan question here. It comes from Eric Plasma for Life. He was going to ask you, last time you were on this program, you mentioned that CM Punk in the UFC was a pipe dream. Have you had any chance to think about it? And have you changed your thoughts now that it looks like he'll be debuting sort of soonish?
Who's he fight?
They still don't know yet. I think they're going to find him someone sort of on his level.
What is his level? Does anybody know?
Well, he obviously he will be making his debut. He hasn't had any amateur fights, he hasn't had any pro fights. So this will be basically him training with guys like Ben Askren and the Grey Season, guys like that for the next year and probably early 2016. So his level we don't know yet.
So this is going to be just excitement extraordinaire, right?
Pretty much.
All he's bringing into the cage is the name, right? No skills.
That's what we know so far. Yeah. I don't know about his skills, but we know he's bringing his name.
Yeah, why don't you fight? You got a good name, right? You've taken a couple jiu-jitsu classes, so you're on the same level. Why don't you get in there and fight?
Yeah, I don't think I'm anywhere near as tough as CM Punk.
Yeah, sorry, our schedules are busy for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, my 2016 is full on fry. It's all completely booked
I've got too much experience to step into the UFC compared to CM Punk. I think I'll go to a different company.
There you go. There you go.
All right,
how are we going to find somebody comparable, since we don't know anything about the skill level?
I don't know. I guess they're going to find a guy who, is low in fights, guy who has like a 1-0 record, 0-1 record.
They were going to get the guy that played the Green Power Ranger from the Power Rangers to fight him at one point.
Yeah.
That would be a classic. They would come in with a suit and everything like that.
Be honest, you'd watch that fight, wouldn't you, Don?
Yeah, I would have to buy a front row seat to that one, I'd mortgage my house, sell my horse just to buy that ticket.
Not the horse, Don. All right, Don, we're gonna finish up.
Speaking of horses, my youngest daughter wants to come over to Australia because and go for a horse ride and take some horsemanship lessons. So anybody's over there, looking to bring a broken up, good-looking fighter like me and a young daughter, I'll come over there and get some classes and swap stories and swap skills.
Yeah, sure, but there's a lot better things to do in Australia than horsemanship lessons. I think I don't know. I think you'd fall asleep during the horsemanship lessons, Don. But there's a lot better things to do in our country. You could do surfing. Surfing's good.
No way. I tell you what, I don't think there's anything more better than riding a horse. I love my horse.
All right, Don. Well, look, we're going to wrap up the interview with something that we like to call the Submission Radio Tap-Out Round. It's a round where we throw some fun questions at you and you answer with the first thing that comes to mind, sort of like word association, but better. So we'll kick it off. You ready, Don?
All right, fire away.
Okay, Don Fryer is at a bar. What's his drink of choice, and what's a drink that a real man never orders from a bar?
My drink of choice is Coors beer, and man never drinks anything with fruit and a straw in it.
That's sound advice. Now, you mentioned your horse and how much you love your horse. Any more issues with the horse? Last time we spoke to you, you mentioned that he bucked you off.
No, I left there a week or so ago, and he lost his shoes the next day. So I got to go home and put shoes back on him. So, yeah, he must miss me. take it, do stuff like that.
Now, Don, a big topic in MMA as of lately has been Ronda Rousey versus men. Most recently, she mentioned that she might be able to beat The Rock. What do you think of these statements?
Oh my God, this is just so fucking stupid. Why is she bitching about who's the woman fighter that she keeps complaining about?
Chris Cyborg.
Chris Cyborg.
Cyborg. Fight Cyborg. Otherwise, shut the hell up. I don't want to hear you say you can fight a man until you fight Cyborg, and don't insist that she gets drug tested for anything, and don't insist that she makes weight. Shut the hell up and fight the woman, like a real fighter does. Don't worry about rules and this and that.
Well, you know what? While we're on the topic of Ronda, what did you think of her dominant victory over Kat Zingano? 14 seconds.
I didn't see it. I left before that. And it sounded stupid, for Kat to go in there and do that. But my judo sensei said, no, you got it all wrong. That girl's a fighter. She's tough. She came to fight. She just made a mistake. He says, the interview, Rogan said something. She said, fuck, I lost. What do you want me to say? He said, that girl's tough. He says, he's impressed with her. So, I think, I could train her. My judo sensei, Steve, could train her to beat Ronda Rousey. First off, you got this smart fight. Ronda's tough. So you got a smarter fight. She's the world champion, and you can't go in there. You can't go in there and charge him. You can't charge the world champion, or you get knocked on the ground, or you get armbarred.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of emotion going into this one. Now let's change topics for a sec, Don. You worked with Curt Hennig in Japan. Curt was a great pro wrestler and a legend. He also released a song called "Rap is Crap," which was actually a chart topper for a while. What does Don Frye think of rap music?
I tell you what, I've still got that T-shirt of Curt Hennig's. Rap is Crap.
Wow.
That's my favorite T-shirt.
Yeah, that's one of those ones that you sort of, it doesn't matter how old and tattered it gets, you never throw away that T-shirt. We saw, Don, that you saw recently the movie American Sniper. Give us your official review of the movie.
That was the greatest movie I've ever seen in my life. It was a great story. Chris Kyle's my hero. He'll always be my hero. Clint Eastwood is my hero. He was the greatest actor. Now he's the greatest director. And Bradley Cooper did a fantastic job portraying Chris Kyle. And you get a chance, go see that movie. When it comes out on DVD, I'll be the first one in line to buy it. It was the greatest movie I ever saw in my life.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper, a fantastic actor with a lot of great movies. Excited to see that one, Don. Haven't seen it yet. Now, we've had a lot of listeners send in this.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you what. Put everything else on hold and go see that movie.
Okay, well, after this, I'm gonna jump. At that opportunity. But before that, we've had listeners send in a whole bunch of questions, and we had to include this one in the tap out round because this question is this: for all the listeners, single listeners out there trying their luck on the scene, what's a pickup line that always works when approaching a woman for Don Frye?
Hey, I'm Don Frye. You want to fuck?
Yeah, I don't know how well that would work for us on the count that we're not Don Frye, but it's certainly one to try. Now, Don, one of the last questions: the Submission Radio marketing team, our marketing team, were told they had to play the role of your Hollywood agent, and that they better do a job, or Don Frye was going to kick their asses. So they came up with 3 possible starring roles for you in movies, or I believe in this case television. So you got to choose your favorite. All right, you got to choose which role you'll be doing next. First one, Special Agent Hank Scotchfield in an episode of Law & Order SVU. You play the hard-nosed tough guy cop from the country, you solve 6 cases, and you show those sissies from the city how it's done. Alright. Second role, Randy Randerson in an episode of Frasier. You play Frasier Crane's new boss at the radio station, and also his mentor psychologist. With your cut-to-the-chase facts and your gun-on-the-table attitude, you show these sissies from the city how it's done. Or... third role, Principal Julian Cumsworth in the hit TV show Glee. You play Principal, whose wisdom is only exceeded by his ability to draw. You also use those drawing skills to connect with the kids, and through a series of interpretive dances, including a 5-minute medley of Pitbull's greatest hits, you change the school for the better and teach the kids the valuable life lessons while showing them how to appreciate the beauty within. Also, you show the sissies from the city how it's done. Which one do you choose, Don?
I'll take number one. I'll take the cop show. Any opportunity to shoot a city slicker, I'm all for it.
That's it.
Now, Don, we're going to wrap up with this question. You mentioned it at the start of the interview. If Ken Shamrock gets hurt, you'd be happy to jump into this fight with Kimbo. So give us your prediction. If Ken Shamrock does get hurt and you jump into this fight with Kimbo, how do you see the fight going?
Oh, man. I tell you what, I see the fans going crazy, a standing ovation, seeing the Don Frye return to the cage. You know, it'll be trumpets blaring, the angels coming down, floating above the cage. It'll be women crying, you know, soldiers saluting, and fireworks exploding without anybody lighting them, and, you know, dogs howling. And when I walk in there, Kimbo Slice will come in, and he'll slip in a puddle of piss when he looks across the corner of me, and it'll be the end of the fight.
That pretty much
He'll knock himself out when he falls down his head.
The picture you've described, it reminds us of almost every Pride show, Don, and it brings back good memories. Guys, don't forget to check out Don Frye's Twitter, @DonFryFighter. As always, Don, it's been a pleasure, and just from the fans and ourselves, please do some more Predators predictions.
All right. I'm going to go over there and talk to Stuart Wilson right now. He's the producer. Go ahead, tell him to get after it. Get off his wallet.
Excellent. We'll be waiting. Don, as always, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. You enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, guys. Take care.
This is Ben Killaby Saunders, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is a friend of the program who beat Josh Koscheck via a devastating, mouth-foaming, north-south choke at UFC 184. He is none other than Jake Ellenberger. Welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you, Jake?
I'm doing well. Thanks, guys. How you doing?
Really good to have you back on the show, Jake. You know, it's been a few weeks removed, I think about maybe a month now, from your fight at UFC 184. Tell us, how are you feeling, and what have you been up to since your big win?
Man, things are good. I've been busy. I think life's been kind of crazy, but you know, it was definitely a good win. It seems like ages ago already, but no, I've been good. I've been busy. I went back home and spent some time with the family back in Nebraska, and did a little shooting. Just kind of get away from LA. I kind of needed a break from LA, to be honest. But no, everything's been good though. I just got back to California. I was out there for about 3 weeks, and then you know, now I'm just getting over a cold, but getting back into the gym slowly. So.
You said that life's been a bit crazy and you needed to get away from LA. I feel like there's a story. I feel like something's been happening in your life that you're not telling us. What's been happening,
I think
Jake?
there's a woman involved. It's always because of the women. They always make me want to switch places.
No, you know, the girlfriend's great. She's great. There's no no issues there. I think it was just more of a, you know, the constant. I'm one of those guys. I don't like a lot of barriers. A lot of, you know, like, I don't like a lot of too much structure. You know, where you kind of just want to do what you want to do. Too much. My schedule was so crazy before the fight. Like every day, you know, timelines where to be here, and then. You know, that built up for a while, so it's kind of like I just need to get break out of the bubble for a little while. So it's kind of nice to get back out and just be myself, you know, and just get away from LA.
Yeah, for sure. Now,
I wish I had a better story for you guys. There's really no other reason, but I just needed to get away.
Well, that's all right. We'll dig for some stories later on in the interview. You know us, Jake. We're interview whores, and we're story whores even more so. We had Edmund on the show, your coach, and we were having a bit of a chat about you. He mentioned a lot of the issues that you were having after your last few fights were just mental issues of confidence and things like that. How good was it for you mentally getting this win over Josh Koscheck?
You know, it was good. You know, Edmund's a great guy. I really have a lot of respect for Ed. He's a very smart guy. there were some things that were, I would definitely say there's some things that were affecting me that were not like a skill or physical, but more so just connecting dots, just pulling the trigger, and that's always easier said than done. But that's really just the how fragile the sport is. I mean, there's so many variables that we always talk about the variables to go into a fight, and then so for me it wasn't really I wouldn't say it was really a skill or a physical thing. I just needed to maybe just to stop thinking too much, because that's really what haunted me for a couple fights. Was just I'm overthinking. I mean, it wasn't really a doubt. I think a lot of people kind of took that as like, oh, he's kind of doubting himself, or he's not as confident. And that really wasn't the issue. It was more so is just thinking too much. You know what I mean? Like I play a lot of cards too. I like to play poker, and that's very thinking man's game, and the same kind of thing. So that's why if I could break it down to a way other people can understand it, it's me thinking too much rather than just acting.
That makes a lot of sense. And, it was obviously a high-pressure situation for you, having to really win that fight after a difficult string of losses. What kind of effect did that have on you in training camp for Josh Koscheck?
It really was motivating. I mean, it's such small things. I mean, people, I think in this sport, people tend to want to make change, and change is not always a good thing. I think, change tends to make people start thinking more than they really should, because in this real life scenario, in MMA, we try to make this a fight, which is a panic mode for most people, and most people would spend most of their life avoiding a fight rather than getting in one. So I think that the more of a sport we make this into, it kind of takes a little bit of the realness away. And I feel like anytime you make a change, you tend to make start thinking differently than you normally do. So for me, it was like I've had new coaching, I've had new different training partners. So things just takes time to develop. That's just the reality. So I think, with the fight, I've lost to top guys. I mean, Rory's fighting Robbie, both guys that I've lost to for the title, and so really it's a matter of inches. And if anything, it was for me. I've come up short and I had to make some adjustments, but it was more of being so close but not succeeding. That's still motivating. So it's like I don't need to reinvent the wheel here. I don't need to make big changes. So making small adjustments, more than anything, was just motivating to make some adjustments and move forward.
Yeah, no, certainly right. You were in there with the best of the best. Now, just going back to that Josh Koscheck fight, you had him in a very, very nice north-south choke. Me and Casper, sometimes we like to muck around and put each other in the north-south choke, and it can be a little bit difficult to tell what the opponent is going at. We've actually foamed on each other when we've done it. No pun intended. And I don't know if you actually saw those Brazza pictures that were going around of Josh Koscheck after the fight, but did you realize the choke was on Josh as tight as it was? And what did you think when you saw that he was foaming on the mouth?
I didn't see. It's funny. It actually turned. It was initially it was a Darce choke. So I usually have had a lot of success with the headies on the Darce choke, and even more so with no arm. So it's kind of like a rear naked choke, but from the front. So. Once I got it, it was it's kind of one of those chokes. Once it's one of those you don't get in it. Like there's not an easy way to get out of it. It's one of those you can do what you want, but it is a blood choke, and I've had a lot of success with that. I mean, with a lot of times rolling with Henry Gracie and Heat on at the Gracie Academy. So
yeah.
I feel like if I can succeed with this choke against guys of their caliber and high level, I can really catch anybody in it. But it was deep, and then I didn't. He was kind of like he's gonna let me. I didn't feel like he was really trying to take that as well. trying to control the octagon and not get hit. That's just kind of what I felt because he wasn't going to take me down. I feel like after the first one I got up and he realized he's going to have to spend a lot of energy trying to take me down. But once I got it on there, I felt like there was no way getting out of it. So he did actually do what most guys do, which is roll under and give up top position. But in my head, he turned quick and I landed on my head. My head hit the mat, but I wasn't letting go of the choke. So I didn't actually, because I couldn't see him when we hit the mat, so I didn't know. I was like he's not. I felt like he was close to tapping, and then the ref's like, no, he's good, and I was like, okay, I'll put him out if he does not going to tap. But he ended up tapping. So I did see a lot of the pictures afterwards, which were brutal. A lot of people were going hard on that picture.
Yeah, a couple of rough ones there, wasn't there, guys?
It was brutal, and honestly, it was one of those, like, I'm not squeamish or anything. Obviously, MMA, it's not ballet, but when I saw the foam, I was like, Jesus, like, what's this rated again? It was one of those moments. But for you, obviously, like we said, you had those tough losses. You came in against a legend like Josh Koscheck. Not only did you win, but you won in in this crazy fashion. I mean, foaming the mouth. When's the last time that's happened? What was that feeling like after you won? Were you relieved? Were you just happy to get the win? Or were you kind of like, oh, this is Jake 2.0, I'm back on track? What was that like?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, it's like we've actually talked about. I mean, I've made so many adjustments with new coaches and new training partners. And that just really takes a lot of time to develop. So I think that even though people only see the result and they're only going to really only going to judge you on the result, there's a lot of good steps forward. So it was kind of good. I knew I was going to win this fight going into it. I just was very excited to have a finish. So there's no like, you want a decision against the. But to get a finish, it was definitely exciting, and I'm already looking to get back in there, hopefully this July.
Yeah, that's it. Well, you mentioned that now that you're back in the California IA, what's going on? When are you looking to fight again? You want to fight? You just mentioned that you want to fight in July. Do you have any opponents in mind? Do you have anybody that you like to be matched up with? Because the way things have gone, Joe Silva, for some reason, really just likes to match up with the toughest guys in the division for every fight. So is there anyone that you want to fight, yeah, or do you want to have like a bit of an easier opponent, or do you want to get thrown straight back in there? What are you thinking?
There's been a few names that I've come across. I mean, I would prefer to face anybody in the top 10, anybody ranked. Absolutely. I mean, you get to a point where once you get into that top 5, you prove you're an elite fighter, and there's never going to be an easy fight. So I feel like any guy, any guy I can beat. So I feel like as long as I have the time to prepare, but I'm shooting for July 11th. So that would be ideal.
July 11th. All right, that's very specific. But no opponents come to mind. No specific names.
No, not yet.
All right. Well, Jake, we're going to do some things. We're going to do some fan questions. When you told the fans you were coming on, they sent in a few questions. So we're going to read out a few of those. Let's have a look. White belt for life. Jake, having been in the octagon with both Rory MacDonald and Robbie Lawler, who would you say wins the title match between the two? And what are your thoughts on Robbie as a champion? Do you think he's a long-term champion?
No, I don't. I think Robbie's a fantastic fighter. And I do think he is deserving of that title, but I don't think he's going to keep it. This division is so stacked. It's funny, I was listening to an interview with George St. Pierre. He's on Chael Sonnen's podcast. And it's always fun listening to George talk, and he has a great analysis of the division, and they talk about, Chael was talking about him the division not having a champion like George St. Pierre again, which is true, and I think there's a couple of reasons. I think the first one is the level of competition has gotten so tough. You know what I mean? If you look at the era of Matt Hughes, I mean, there's some great fighters, but you could succeed with being elite in one area. And these days, that's just not true. You got to be good everywhere. So, and there's really not anybody I think in the division that's going to keep the title. I think, you look at Johnny Hendricks, Robbie Lawler, Rory MacDonald. I think they're all good enough to win the belt. I mean, I don't see Robbie holding it. I actually think Rory's going to beat him. And I'm not even rooting for Rory. I'm rooting for Robbie, but that's just, I think the kid is good. Whether you like him or not, he is good. And I think Rory will win. But I don't think anybody's going to keep the belt for a long period of time, no.
Yeah, the heart lies where the heart lies, Jake. Now, we've got actually a question here from the Omoplata Master. This is a question that's relating to this. He goes, Jake, you fought Robbie Lawler once. If you could have a rematch with the champ, what would you do differently, and what would you see as the outcome in the rematch?
Oh, great question. Actually, I think about that a lot. It's funny. I've watched him quite a bit, and there's a few things I would do differently. I think I would change my stance a lot more. He actually doesn't do as well with southpaws as he does an orthodox fighter. But really, I would just get on him earlier. Force him to wrestle. I would really not move straight forward. I think he's a very straightforward guy. He moves forward and backward. He doesn't do well if you get angled or even get to his back. So I think that I would try to control the clinch and get getting the hands on him, take him down. There's a lot of things. It's always hindsight's always 20/20. But yeah, I would love to fight again. Do I think I can beat him? Absolutely. There's, it's just being the better guy, and for me, executing. So, do I have the skills to beat him? Yes. Executing those is the equation.
For sure. Now, WMMA All Night wants to know, Jake, seeing as you train out of the Glendale Fight Club, just wanted to get your thoughts on Ian McCall claiming that he could throw Ronda Rousey on her head, and these comparisons everyone keeps talking about Ronda being able to beat up a man. I believe the latest target was The Rock.
The Rock. What was the first part of your question?
So, WMMA All Night wants to know, seeing as you train out of Glendale Fight Club, just wanted to get your thoughts on Ian McCall claiming that he could throw Ronda Rousey on her head.
Oh, Ian McCall. Could he throw on her? I don't think so. No, I don't. I like Ian, too. He's a good guy. I think she's just, she's really a special athlete, and I think, the guys try to kind of huff and puff and feed their ego a little bit, and it's like, sure, she's a woman, but you can't take away her skills. I mean, she's one of the best judo fighters in the world. So I don't think that would happen. B, could she beat a man? Sure. It's funny. The podcast I do with Adam Hunter on MMA Roasted, we get this question every day, and I think Adam and Marina, and they always go back and forth. But could she? Absolutely. You know what I mean? I think she's. People try to continually to focus on the man versus woman, and it's like, listen, there's guys in the UFC that shouldn't even be in the UFC, and I just think from a skill point of view, absolutely, she is. She's phenomenal.
Now, speaking of guys in the UFC that shouldn't be in the UFC, last fan question here comes from Eric DeSlammer. He goes, Jake, it looks like you have a new addition in the welterweight division in CM Punk. Do you think he stands any chance in the UFC with no real MMA background?
That's, it's really hard to say. I think CM Punk is it's hard to make a judgment. I mean, we haven't seen him fight. It's the welterweight is probably the toughest division there is. So I don't know. I would be surprised. I would definitely be surprised. It'd be easy to say no, but I have nothing to judge that on. So I can't say.
That's entirely fair enough. The day is coming when we'll all be able to find out. Jake, we're going to round off the interview with, of course, the Submission Radio tap out round. Bunch of fun questions, and you answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so you told us an interesting story about Mickey Rourke last time and how you accidentally, quote-unquote accidentally, broke into his poor neighbor's house at around about midnight. Scared her, but made friends with her dog, so it's okay. Have you taught Mickey Rourke any grappling moves yet? And if so, which ones did you teach him?
Yeah, he's we've done some upper body grappling. He's wanted to train a little bit more wrestling, learn some kind of Greco, more so for shoulder conditioning and shoulder workouts. So we've done a lot of upper body clinching stuff and then pummeling, that kind of stuff. So he's been enjoying that.
Yeah, no, I expect to see him do that DAS choke in his next movie on someone. Maybe like Iron Man 4 or something. Just put Iron Man in a DAS choke.
Hopefully.
Yeah. That'd be great look for Robert Downey Jr. Now, Jake, you mentioned there hasn't been too many hilarious stories in your life since we've last spoken, but I have to ask you one more time. Do you have anything for us? Any funny occurrences you can share with us since the last time we've spoken to you?
Man, nothing really dramatic has happened since the last time we spoke. But
Well, you weren't returning any pants from the store, and you wore them, and you fell on them, and then you ruined the very pants that you went to return.
No. No. Yeah,
That's
no,
I'll tell you what.
Man,
You can bring it up. You can bring it up for the rest of the duration of the interview. Just like we'll be like, Jake, we'll ask you a serious question. Like, Jake, what do you think of steroids in MMA? And you'll be like, all right, I got my funny story. You can just interject at any time.
Sounds good.
If you do remember anything, like you broke into someone else's house by accident and this cat burglar career is really taking off, then definitely let us know. Now, Jake, Ultra Mobile is one of your sponsors. Give us your number one app on your phone right now.
No, I don't really play a lot of games. I just got a poker app on my phone. That's really the only game I play, poker and blackjack. But I try to stay off my phone. To be honest, I spend too much time on social media, so I've been trying to cut down a little bit. But yeah, as far as games, I just say the poker app's probably the one I've been playing the most.
Oh yeah, you got to stay away from those poker apps. I have an Uno app. That's a good one as well. Now, you tweeted out how brilliant do you think the writers for Modern Family are. Me and Casper, Modern Family enthusiasts ourselves. So, Jay, give us your favorite episode, please.
You know, funny story. Ed O'Neill, I've known Ed O'Neill for a little while now because he's been a black belt at the Gracie Academy, and I've always been a big fan of Ed O'Neill. And when he was telling us about the show before it came out, and I started watching it, and I thought the whole thing is hilarious. I mean, I think the funniest episode to me was when the couple, the gay couple, their dads were arguing over which one of their sons was the woman yep. and which one was the man, and they both were like, no, mine's the man, like flexing kind of. It was so funny, and you could tell Ed O'Neill, he's very old school, so he's like, you could tell he's probably kind of just like losing his mind. Like if this was real life, he'd be getting so pissed. But I think it's just because he's a good friend and a great guy. But recently, a buddy of mine, I went to high school with Adam Devine, and he's from Workaholics, and he just started. He just came onto the show Modern Family, which I didn't even know until I saw the episode, but it was great. I was watching because I think he came on as the daughter's boyfriend or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's into Haley.
But
into Haley.
Yeah. So then I was like, no way. So I hit him up, but it's just funny because he's a good guy. He's hilarious.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what. Did you watch that episode of Workaholics where they go to a pride party, and it turns out to be like not the pride party that they thought? So they come in wearing these like Pride FC T-shirts, and they're like, "All right, let's do some MMA." And then it's like a
gay pride
party. Yeah. Have you seen that one? It's
I didn't
classic,
know.
Man.
No, I haven't actually. Dang it, but I will.
He's a classic, and he was good in Pitch Perfect as well, surprisingly. So I think you should teach him some grappling, and he can teach you some singing.
I know. I don't think I'll be pursuing any singing, but yeah, maybe some acting. We'll see. I might do some down the road, but
you could be like, you could do cameos in like the new Terminator movie, like Jake Ellenberger, Terminator's son. You obviously come from, you train in California, you're in LA. There's got to be like celebrities on every corner, pretty much. What's the biggest starstruck experience that you've ever had, Jake?
That's a good one. I don't get starstruck a lot. There's been a few guys that who've been really cool to meet. Mario Lopez was really cool. Yeah, I think I liked him because I was, that generation when he was in Saved by the Bell, so that was always funny. But and he's really not a big one. But I was at a Kings game and I ran into Tom Cruise. He was down in the in one of the kind of the family room or something. But
Wow.
He was a cool guy too. So I was just people that I've watched a lot growing up. I mean, I think at the same time from the first time I met Mickey Rourke too. If I haven't seen some of the movies, The Wrestler and some of his work is like just. But everyone's super cool. I think Wild Card. I mean, there's so many celebrities coming in and out of Wild Card a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
I've met a lot of cool musicians. I've met, Bruno Mars, Usher. So there's a lot of big fight fans though in that world.
A lot of neighbors' houses to break into, Jake.
Yeah, I know. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. I might end up with a dog bite or a gunshot. Who knows?
Yeah. Now, Jake, we know you love motocross. We know you love it. You love to tweet about it. Do you ride yourself? And what kind of tricks can Jake do on his motocross bike?
Yeah, I do. I've been riding for a while. I just like to cruise. I like to ride for fun. I don't do tricks. I mean, I can do some jumps, but I don't do anything. I think you hit a certain age and you stop. You don't think you're bulletproof anymore. You're like, I'm not going to just do some. I don't do nothing nearly as crazy as I used to. Also because I want to have a longer fight career, but yeah, I've been actually riding a Kawasaki, so they've been great. Kawasaki's been great to me, and it's been still watching the motocross, watching Supercross. It's coming to an end, but there's a lot of places out here in California to ride to. So many places.
There you go. I feel like it's one of those things you keep on the down low. Otherwise, you get a phone call from Dana White like, Jake, get off that bike. You got to fight in a week.
Yeah, that's right. Jake really does like 360 flips and all this other stuff. And he's like, in case Dana White listens to this interview, Jake, don't worry. Dana doesn't listen to our show. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
I know.
Isn't it ridiculous? But
I was gonna pull a prank actually. I'm still trying to make this work, but a good buddy of mine, Mike Mason, he's an X Games guy. He's a freestyle motocross guy. And he's in Vegas, and he's the one. He does all kinds of stuff, just crazy backflips. And so then I was going to have him wear my jersey and film a little quick video, like a backflip or something, and send it to Dana or have somebody. He would probably lose his mind. I don't know if that's a good idea.
That'd be awesome. And someone would need to be there to film Dana White's reaction, kind of like BJpenn.com played that prank on Luke Rockhold. Jake, the way we're sort of speaking, I feel like there's a lot we still don't know about you. Can't wait till one day your book comes out and you tell us all these crazy stories about the motocross and all the celebrities in it, and things like that. We can't wait to see you back, hopefully in July. Who you fight, it remains a big question mark. We're excited. Don't forget, guys, to follow Jake on Twitter at Ellenberger MMA and keep an eye out for your own opportunity to hang with Jake. He does a lot of regular hangouts, and they are awesome. Jake, thank you so much for coming back on the show. We always appreciate it.
Oh, anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
Jake Ellenberger, there you go. What a great guy. He's actually become a part of the Submission Radio family almost, Cass. We've had him on so much, and sometimes when we have these interviews, I almost feel like we're just a few guys behind the bar, swinging a few beers, shooting the breeze, just talking about what's going on. And listeners know we love hearing Jake's stories. He's always had some good stories, so it's great to have him back on the show, and best of luck to him. Good to see that he's rebounded with a win. But Cass, this weekend, the UFC did something that would be a pretty cool moment for yourself, being a Polish Australian. They went over to Poland, into UFC Poland. It was a big moment, obviously, for a lot of people. Were you excited when you saw that UFC was coming back home to you?
For sure, absolutely. And you use the term Polish Australian. I mean, the truth of the matter is, I'm 100% Polish. I was born there. I came here to lovely Australia when I was 5 years old. And my family, and I've asked my parents, I'm like, is there any mixture, anything? And they're like, nope, just plain Poles, like going back hundreds and hundreds of years. Wow. So for me, it was extremely exciting to see, UFC is going to go down there and, put on a card. And obviously, you've got KSW, which is the biggest promotion for mixed martial arts in Poland, and I would probably say in Europe. So to see the UFC go there and make a splash, it was interesting. And as we've spoken to Tom Wright in the past, when he's come down to Sydney and Adelaide, he's always mentioned you only get one shot to make an impression. And in this case, talking about the card, the big question is, did they make the impression they were after? You had...
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. It's tough. Well, look, attendance, it looked like it was 10,000 strong, which is pretty good, I think, for a card over there. There was some interesting prelims before the main card kicked off. Cass, any thoughts on the prelims from your end?
Look, this card was very lopsided with prelims. So you had a lot of prelims, and you had only 4 fights on the main card. To be honest, this was not the greatest UFC card put on, so I largely want to skip past a lot of the prelims. There's a few things that I want to talk about. One of the fights I actually want to talk about is the women's strawweight fight. Alexandra Albu against the Pole Isabella Badurek. Alexandra Albu, you know, she's been someone who's been on the radar for a lot of guys, a lot of fans for a long time. You know, she's had YouTube videos, and there's a lot of, you Google image her name, there's so many photos. So she's someone I was very well aware of, even though she only had 1 fight. Very, very strong girl. You know, you look at her, she's extremely powerful looking. In this fight, you know, both her and Isabella, they had that judo background. I guess the story is I liked Alexandra's striking. She looked very, very, very comfortable and confident in there. Her striking looked crisp. Isabella was always trying to close the distance, really trying to get that takedown. There's really a few times where she was really trying to get in a judo throw, putting Alexandra against the cage. The unfortunate thing for Isabella was once she finally got that takedown, she got guillotined and basically submitted. You know, second round wasn't really the most exciting fight. We didn't get to see Alexandra put on her striking, which in my opinion is really her strong suit. And it's a big shame for Isabella. You know, in terms of the Polish fighters, I mean, as a proud Pole as I am, you know, our guys, we didn't really do that well on this card. You know, a lot of the Polish guys, you know, got beaten. Seth Paczynski, there's another guy. I mean, he's been around for a long time. He's not someone that they pulled randomly from Poland for this card. I mean, he's obviously got an extremely Polish name. He's got a Polish background. His nickname, Polish Pistola. He got knocked out in 8 seconds by Leon Edwards. Beautiful punch right there. You know, looking good for Leon Edwards. He was obviously coming off a loss. Seth Paczynski, however, not so good. And this is something that I want to talk about. I mean, he's had some really exciting fights in the UFC, but to be honest, most of his wins have come over competition that really hasn't been that great. Guys like Clay Harvison, he did beat Matt Brown, which, I mean, that's definitely his biggest win to date. And then there's Lance Benoit, and he did beat Neil Magny. But in between those wins, there's losses to guys like Mike Pierce, Brian Melancon, Thiago Alves, Alan Jobin, and obviously Leon Edwards this past weekend. And a lot of these losses have come via knockout. So it's really getting to that point for the veteran of the Ultimate Fighter season 11 with Chuck and Tito, where you're looking at him going, man, how much longer does he have in this game? I mean, he's a guy who used to really thrive on wars, and he used to have really fun fights, and now he's getting knocked out quite recently, namely his last 2 fights. You know, what are you thinking about Seth's future, Dennis?
It's a tough one, Cass. It's a tough one, Cass, because he was talking to the media about how this is a dream come true, fighting in Poland. Obviously, he's Polish, and it sort of went from a dream to a nightmare for him. I agree with you. It looks like he's certainly on a downslope. He's had some tough matchups, but losing his last couple of fights by KO in the first round, he's not a Josh Koscheck where Dana White's is going to throw opportunities at him. So I think he might be getting his walking papers, but it's a tough game. And the more fighters they're going to sign, the more fighters we're going to see released by the UFC now, I guess. And I think he might be a part of that list. And I was actually interested when you mentioned that obviously you're a proud Pole, because it reminded me, this is going off topic a little bit, but it reminded me of back in the day, I believe it was UFC 110, we saw who's that Polish fighter that we saw? He fought Stefan Bonner.
Krzysztof Soszyński.
Yeah, Krzysztof Soszyński, that's right. And who was standing next to me with a proud Polish scarf at the arena over there in Sydney? None other than Kasper Ozlowski himself. And I believe we spoke to him later on after the fight, and he actually noticed your scarf in the crowd.
He did. It was the highlight of my life right there. Really, 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 really nice guy. And I mean, I believe he's DJing now. I believe that's his full-time gig. He used to be a bodybuilder. I think maybe a pro wrestler. Used to fight
he's in movies as well. He's in a few movies lately as well. So it's good to see the big man sort of having a nice post-fight career.
Yeah, he's around, but you know, he had that obviously appearance on Bas Rutten and Kenny Rice's show, I believe, Inside MMA, and he divulged some information about, you know, concussions and things like that. And if you haven't checked it out, check it out. But there was some really sad things in it. He really opened up, and he really, I think, got choked up as well, because it really affected him negatively. And I don't want to see the same thing for a guy like Seth Paczynski, regardless of whether you're Polish or wherever you come from. I don't really want to see that for guys. And I feel extra bad for Seth because if you look at his shorts, like he never really decks himself out as like, look at me, I'm Polish. But he had like the red and the white, and he had like the eagle on there from the old school Polish flag. And, you know, I think he really wanted to make a statement. He was obviously main eventing the prelim cards, and to get knocked out that quickly by Leon Roberts, who really, you know, hasn't had that much of a tenure in the UFC, would be really, really heartbreaking for him. Before we talk about the main card, I just want to make a few points. You know, the prelims, largely uneventful. They weren't really the greatest. I mean, we've been treated to some good cards recently. This one, I wouldn't say was the greatest by any means, and I think most fans would agree. I just want to make a point, though, that the UFC does not have a TV deal in Poland. So to me, if I'm the UFC, I'm thinking, what's the point of bringing in all these guys? You know, let's say you bring in, I don't know, Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos and I don't know, all these big names. I mean, I'm sure if they brought down like a GSP or Conor McGregor, everybody would recognize them. But a lot of these guys in the UFC wouldn't be recognized anyway. Like the Polish fans, they really love KSW, and I think they're familiar with most of the European fighters. And just in general, they're familiar with other Polish fighters. You know, guys like Marcin Held and Mamed Khalidov. Obviously, you've got Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but she's the champion and she just fought. So a lot of the best fighters, the Polish fighters, aren't in the UFC anyway. With these local cards, like the Australia cards and the Sweden cards and you know the Brazilian cards, those cards are there for those local countries. And the reason why I don't think the UFC cares too much whether the Americans or the Australians or whatever enjoy those cards is because they're making money from those TV deals. It's not a pay-per-view, it's a free card, but where they make the money is, you know, whatever Globo in Brazil will be like, all right, UFC, you want to come to our country? Great. This is how much we're going to pay you. You're going to make money off the TV deal. Because you know, the Polish fans don't get that exposure to UFC. I honestly think it would have been a waste if they did stack the card with a whole bunch of names. And I don't know if this is the popular opinion, but I think it was the right thing to do. To go in there with a whole bunch of local talent, get everybody excited, get everybody to come down to the arena to see the local guys, you know, hopefully win, even though it didn't happen. And give him that, you know, exposure to the UFC. I think, you know, I think maybe they'll come back and they'll put on a better show once they have a better TV deal, or once they do have an actual TV deal in place.
You know, I think that's a great point. And I was actually thinking about these fight night cards, Cass, and I'll be honest, sometimes it's difficult to watch them because you don't know who's on the card and you only have so many hours in a day and everybody has a life they have to get to. But I almost look at a lot of these Fight Pass cards and a lot of these fight night cards almost as separate cards to the usual UFC cards that I watch. It's almost like I'm watching, if I can compare it to wrestling terms, like a WWE Heat or one of those sort of shows where you see up-and-coming talent. I don't classify it anymore sort of as the UFC 185s or like the pay-per-view shows or the big Fox cards. I have sort of a couple of different categories in my mind. And when I watch these cards, I sort of expect to see some up-and-comers. And that way, it makes it a little bit easier for me sometimes when I'm watching the prelims. But just a couple of things for all those wrestling fans out there. A couple of namesakes on the prelims. Stevie Ray fought and actually got a KO on the card. Everybody remembers, obviously, the Harlem Heat, Stevie Ray with Booker T. And Damian Stasiak actually lost on the card as well. And he's got a namesake as well. So some funny memes coming out over Twitter in the week leading up to that. And just something funny I wanted to point out.
Did you notice, but I'm not going to talk about the Cro Cop fight yet, but did you notice the guy in Cro Cop's corner looked exactly like Kevin Nash?
No, I did not. Did he?
Tall guy, looked exactly like Big Sexy. Yeah, not as sexy, but he was pretty big. He was like tall, like, I don't know, 6'4", 6'5", 6'8", I don't know, 8 foot tall, whatever, somewhere between that bracket, and looked exactly like Kevin Nash. So,
did he walk into the octagon by stepping over the top of the cage? Yeah.
Unfortunately not, but given his height, I'm sure he could have if he wanted to. He just didn't want to show off, that badly.
Yeah.
I was going to say something also in regards to what you mentioned about these names and the cards and these some of these Fight Pass cards being separate. I feel almost like if you go back to the UFC, like, I don't know, let's say 2011, I'm always looking back at cards thinking that they weren't that long ago and then going, Jesus, that was 4 years ago. Oh my God. Remember when Jake Shields got knocked out by Jake Ellenberger? I remember that card because there was a really big stretch. It was UFC Battle in the Bayou. and it was a really big stretch where there wasn't many events, and it was like, I don't know, 6 weeks we had to wait for a UFC card. And I remember everyone was aching for it, like, come on, you know, UFC. I think that's when forums were really buzzing, because all you really had to do was go on forums and talk about, and, you know, fight cards coming up. And I feel like now you've got a card pretty much every week. And back then, it was almost like you couldn't miss a UFC card. It doesn't matter whether it was 4 weeks away, 6 weeks away, whatever. Everyone was just gearing up for the next big card. And I know that the Dana White and the UFC would really make you feel like an asshole if you did miss a card. But I feel like now you really can. If you're doing something, you don't want to watch UFC Poland or, you know, UFC Krakow because it's just, you know, a lot of these guys are not on your radar. You can just literally Foxtel IQ it, tune in for the Krokop Gonzaga fight because that's the main name that people see, and sort of be done with it. And I think, you know, the UFC even understands that, and they're probably a lot more forgiving because they're like, you know what, doesn't really matter. As long as the local people show up, you know, if they go to Poland, as long as the crowd turns out, you know, that's the main important thing for them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And a lot of people are like, what's the developmental league to get into the UFC? And I almost feel like the UFC has their own developmental league inside the UFC.
Yeah.
And it's these fight night cards. And then you get to know these people, and then eventually they make their way up to a better card like on Fox, or if they're really good on a pay-per-view or something like that. So it's definitely an interesting structure. Now, getting into the main card, Big Cass, women's strawweight division, we actually had someone from my country of the fascinating Ukraine that's actually been having a few issues of late. But her name was Marina Moroz, and she versed Joanne Calderwood. Obviously, Calderwood, an experienced strawweight, ranked 6th. When you saw this matchup was taking place, was it a sure thing for you that Calderwood would come out on top?
Short answer, yes. I thought, look, JoJo was really aching for this fight. She really wanted to get in there, fight. She was basically calling out anyone and everyone, you know, really almost nagging Dana White, like, come on, put me on a card. She finally got it. She obviously is a really experienced striker, former world Muay Thai champion. So I think it was a given that if she wins 1 or 2 decent fights and she's impressive, she's going to be fighting Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the title. And things really didn't go her way at all. What did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Lazy performance by Calderwood. I mean, let's not take anything away from Moroz. She did a great job, great armbar finish, and I mean, she really jumped into that armbar. But Calderwood was just incredibly lazy in that situation. And I mean, we've all been in training where someone's tried to armbar us, and 90% of the time it's not going to happen. And I believe Calderwood thought that was the case, but she actually got her arm out at one point and was too lazy to keep it out. Moroz pulled it back in, and then Calderwood just jumped up and tried to pull that long arm out, which was a mistake. A lot of people with long limbs will know this. Even if you go back to the John Jones fight, you don't try and escape like that, or you choose a better time. And she actually gave it to Moroz. She finished it with that armbar. I just thought Calderwood just didn't turn on for that fight. You expect more from the number 6 ranked strawweight woman. And this is going to be a loss that really hits her, I think, because, you know, she got beaten by a relative unknown fighter. The other thing that sort of got me a bit annoyed was this whole situation with Joanna, who's obviously the champion of the strawweight division. I mean, you've got this fighter who's relatively unknown, who just got a pretty big win, but I still wouldn't say, hey, this is going to be someone that's going to be fighting the champion. And the whole moment just went for too long for me. Like, Joanna was up there, she was saying stuff, but it wasn't the kind of cool tension building moment that like Ken Shamrock had with Tito Ortiz, or, you know, Conor McGregor had with Jose Aldo. It was one of those moments where it was sort of unnecessary, and it was too much. And I think Dan Hardy, he was doing the interview with Moroz after she won, and the translator just completely translated everything wrong. I speak Russian, so I was able to gauge it. Not only did he translate wrong for her, but he translated it wrong back in English. So, and then Dan Hardy tried to follow it, but I thought that it was probably a sort of an interviewing train of questions that was unnecessary. And I feel like that moment went on for too long. What did you think, Cass? What do you think of Calderwood's performance?
Yeah, just on that moment, I really do agree. I think the one question that got me was when Dan Hardy asked if you were going to fight the champion, how would that fight go? I was thinking, like, dude, she just... Why? And you know, I like Dan Hardy. For what it's worth, I really like Dan Hardy. I think he does a great job. But yeah, to me, that question was like, I don't know why he's asking that. Like, this is not an interview like it's on Submission Radio. We've got 15, 20, half an hour, you know, minutes to discuss things like that. Like, you need to get in there, get out. You've got like a minute tops to do this. I don't think she just finished a fight. I don't think she's even really studied Joanna all that much to really break down how the fight would go.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was a necessary question, but whatever. Just in this fight, both girls came out really aggressive. Marina closed the distance really nicely, and she hit JoJo with some combinations, some really tight hooks and uppercuts on the inside. Although she did a good job closing the distance and really stunning Joanne. I really don't think JoJo expected that, but with that armbar, it was nice, but it was very telegraphed. I feel almost like it was in slow motion. Like you mentioned John Jones before. In that John Jones versus Vitor Belfort fight, I mean, Vitor Belfort pounced like the lion he claims he is.
Yeah, he cut the angle quick on that, yeah.
How quick was that?
Very
that was like,
quick,
boom, lightning. No one expected that. John Jones was probably the most surprised out of anyone. With this armbar, it was very slow. Everyone saw it coming. And I think, with jiu-jitsu, when you're in guard, you really have to follow people's hips. Don't let them try and get those angles. And that's actually something that you learned pretty early on. And I think JoJo really let her get away with it. And like you mentioned, you do have those lazy days where you're like, I'll be fine. I'll get out of it. And unfortunately, in the UFC, you can't do that. And when she was stacking Marina, and really staying close to her, I was like, all right, good. She can't extend if she keeps doing that. But then when she stood up, I was like, dude, what are you doing?
She gave it to her. She gave it to her like a Christmas present, nicely wrapped.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. I like JoJo, and I think she'll bounce back. But I don't want to call her lazy, but this performance definitely wasn't her best. And the moment that followed afterwards definitely went way too long. To be honest, Marina, I mean, she had a good win, but she's completely unknown. Not many people know her. And like you mentioned, it's not like it's a Conor McGregor who's got a lot of hype and he's running down chasing Jose Aldo. I think Marina was actually pretty respectful, as was Joanna. I think maybe if you didn't understand the moment, you might have thought, oh, there's some kind of beef. But I don't think there was. Both girls were kind of smiling. And I think Joanna might have misunderstood a little bit and thought that there was some kind of tension, but there wasn't. So I'm curious to see what happens with JoJo in the future. And the other thing is, with Marina, man, she was a big underdog. I think it was she was paying $550 to win. And Joanne was whatever, minus 900 underdog. So if there's any cheeky rascals out there that put a cheeky $10 on Marina to win, you'd be looking at $55 return.
Yeah, I agree with you, Cass. And the other thing I don't understand is, why does the UFC get these translators that can't translate? I mean, we see it all the time, and it's just ridiculous because they don't actually know what's going on. I want to see more time being spent finding translators that they can rely on that can actually translate a question. I mean, it's usually, I don't pick these things up because I don't speak Brazilian or any other languages that they have. But it always happens when Fedor Emelianenko gets interviewed. They always get really crappy translators, and you get just ridiculous answers that aren't factual. And it was even worse this time around. So I don't know if anybody speaks Russian or Polish or anything in the UFC organization, but if they do, I'd like to see some good translators, because I almost feel like it's robbing the fans of those good moments and giving them the wrong answers. And then it just becomes really stupid to me. And especially a league like the UFC, you want translators that you can rely on, because how important is it, in Brazilian cards and other cards, to get, what the fighters are saying correctly and not some fictional thing that isn't true. It's just, I don't know, it just seems a bit ridiculous for me on this level of the sport.
Hey, send in the D-man.
That's it, yeah.
You'll be down there at the first UFC Russia or the first UFC Ukraine. Let's move on. Let's talk about the next card, the next fight. Sheldon Westcott versus Pavel Pavlak. Last time Sheldon fought was in April 2014 at the Tough Finale against Elias Theodorou. Now, he was fighting as a middleweight. Now he made his welterweight debut. To be honest, it really wasn't a great debut at all. He had almost exactly a year. I think, give or take, about 5 days. So he had a year basically to hone on his skills and improve. And Sheldon Westcott, I mean, on the show, on the Ultimate Fighter Smashes, he looked really, really impressive. He looked like a beast, and I actually picked him to beat Elias when it came to the finale. What actually happened was Sheldon gassed out, and he seemed very one-dimensional. And to be honest, a year later, that's exactly the same thing that happened. Before I sort of break it down and go into my notes, what did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Yeah, Cass, really well put. And I'll go out on a limb and say he actually looked worse today than he did in that performance that he had in the Tough Finale, because there he had an excuse for running out and getting tired. I mean, I didn't like Westcott's performance in this fight. He was too committed to getting his underhooks and pushing. And I'm going to have to excuse myself for all the Polish fans. Cass, how do you pronounce the surname of the person that he fought? Was it Powell? Powell?
Well, his first name is Pavel. You just call him Pavel.
Powell, okay.
That's
There
the
we go.
easiest way.
People realize I can't pronounce anyone's name now. But yeah, against Powell, he put him up against the fence. He actually left himself open to be thrown all day. And although he only got thrown once, he could have been thrown a number of times because he was actually off balance because he was pushing his underhook so much. Powell really should have taken advantage of that overhook position better. That sort of frustrated me a little bit. What else frustrated me about Westcott is that he's a talented fighter, but he came in with a safe and ultra boring game plan to get a grind out win. I wanted to see, he's an explosive guy. He's exciting. I wanted to see him strike Powell through some good strikes and try to make it a fun fight. But it was just really tough when Westcott was just trying to push him up against the fence the whole time. When he did get Westcott down, he looked great on the ground. Beautiful control from side control, great side control, great north-south position. It almost looked like Westcott just gave up and didn't try and regain a better position off his back. And I just think it was a terrible performance from Westcott. I mean, why go out there and with a game plan like that? I get a little bit sick of seeing fighters push other fighters against the fence like that. I wish Westcott would have focused on some of his other skills. He's a great striker, and a safe performance usually now in the UFC equals a loss. So I think the other thing that annoyed me was it was a tough fight to watch for me. I found it incredibly boring in the parts where Westcott was just holding him against the fence the whole time. And I just feel like it's a part of MMA that needs to be looked into in the future, because I hate it when fighters just do that for the whole fight and don't threaten with anything. I mean, Westcott is a talented fighter, and he just did not look good to me in this fight whatsoever. And what's more important is, he didn't give his opponent a chance to have an exciting fight because of his strategy. I don't know. What did you think, Cass?
No, I would completely agree with you, and that really seemed to be the theme for this card in general for UFC Poland. There was so much clinching against the cage. I honestly don't think that Sheldon Westcott's going to fight in the UFC again, and here's the reason why. Sheldon really struggled to get Pavel down, and when Pavel, when he did take him down, he couldn't keep him down. The other thing is, Sheldon, when he was in the clinch, he's got great judo, but for some reason, he's very, very physical. He uses a lot of strength. I don't see him nice and loosey-goosey and using technique. He just really looks like he's trying to
muscle.
Yeah, just out-muscle the guys down and hold them down on the ground. And, it's crazy to see Sheldon get frustrated and put himself in dangerous positions and have Pavel actually judo throw him and get the Uchimata on him. I believe he got it on him 3 times. So not only did Sheldon not get him down, he got it thrown himself. Being a judo guy, that just shouldn't happen. Pavel caught Sheldon with a good knee. I was impressed, I guess, to see Sheldon recovered really quickly, but even once he did recover, again, he went for the clinch and went back up to the cage straight away. The other thing is, with Sheldon, he was very, very square when he threw his strikes. He wasn't side on at all. He was literally facing Pavel, which makes his arms a lot shorter and doesn't give him that kind of reach. And he was also very tight and very stiff when he threw shots. So he had these looping shots, but they didn't really go anywhere because of how square on he was staying to Pavel. The other thing is, after all that muscling in the first 2 rounds, he just completely gassed and he couldn't do anything. Once he did get Pavel down on the ground, he just really couldn't do anything and he got reversed straight away. Honestly, I didn't like the fight. I've got nothing against Sheldon Westcott, but I just wasn't impressed. I put a GSP. I wasn't impressed by the performance, and I don't think the UFC are going to keep him around because they don't like guys like the John Fitches and the Yushin Nakamis and the Jake Shields. They just don't really have any tolerance for that kind of stuff. So
it ruined the card a little bit for me. Like, it didn't ruin the card, but it ruined my experience of watching the card a little bit because it was just a tough fight to watch. And those kind of fights, especially on the main card, I mean, they take a lot from events, I reckon, for a lot of the guys that are watching at home.
Yeah, I think it was a big handbrake. Honestly, if it wasn't for Cro Cop Gonzaga, this card would have been really disappointing. Let's talk about the next fight, Jimmy Manuwa versus Jan Blachowicz. What were your thoughts on this fight? Two guys, 2 good strikers, 2 heavy hitters. What were your expectations? What did you think of the fight?
Well, I was just absolutely shocked when I saw that Jimmy was 35 years old because I just never thought of him as someone who was 35 years old. I guess everybody always talks about Jimmy as the next up-and-comer, but at 35 years old, I mean, how many years do you have left fighting, really? I mean, he's not going to be sort of fighting until he's 45, so maybe about 5 or 6 good years left in him. So I was a bit shocked by that. I thought it wasn't a great fight. I think that Jan was pretty good with some of his footwork. He used his jab a lot, and it really paid off in the 3rd round. And I feel like MMA fighters don't use their jab enough, and GSP really showed you that the jab is really important because it sets up a lot of your combinations, and after a couple of rounds, it actually takes a toll on your opponent's face. But Jan looked like he was sort of more defensive than offensive. He had some good shots, but he just didn't look like he was out there to finish Jimmy. He actually had a beautiful switch kick that he threw. He had a good head kick that he threw. But Jimmy just wasn't very loose. He was very, very tight. He didn't get off on very many exchanges. I think the Polish fans really wanted to see a finish, even though they were backing Jan. I think they would have enjoyed to see Jimmy have some kind of highlight reel finish himself. Overall, it wasn't a bad fight. There was some good exchanges, but it certainly wasn't a huge step up from the Westcott fight. And I think Jan, he's such an experienced guy, but he just looked a little bit nervous being in that UFC cage. And I mean, it makes sense. Manuwa's a really, really tough guy, but yeah, the fight wasn't my favorite. I'm interested to see him fight someone in the top 10. I think they really need to, if he wants to win the title, he really needs to make a run for it now, being 35, and really test himself against the best of the best. But he was pretty stiff. We found out after the fight, though, that he was injured and he didn't pull out of the fight even though he was injured. So that's really, really respectable. And that's probably why we didn't see the same Manuwa that we usually see. Cass, what did you think of the fight?
Yeah, you definitely got to give Jimmy respect for that. I think with Jimmy Manuwa, if he's going to be getting a title shot or really moving up in the division, the time is now. They got to really move quickly because he's an explosive guy, and he's exciting. I mean, prior to this, his only loss was against Alexander Gustafsson. So I think if they're going to get him to a title shot, they really need him, push him along. He doesn't, like you said, he doesn't have many years left. With Jan, I mean, he was the technically superior striker. I think both guys were understandably, I guess cagey was the word of the night, so let's just use cagey. They were both pretty careful and they respected each other's power. A few things that I was impressed with, like you mentioned, Jan's jab, really good to see that. Really good takedown defense from Jimmy Manuwa. Jan obviously has his fair share of submission wins. Man, just another thing to mention, Jimmy Manuwa looks huge. I mean, even as a light heavyweight, he's a really big, intimidating man. One thing though, Jan's jabs were really good, but a lot of the time when Jimmy threw punches, he missed. Most of the punches, if you watch that fight, most of Jimmy's punches didn't actually connect. I don't know whether it was bias from the commentators, but a lot of the times they'd say, "Oh, nice right hook and a big left." And when I watched that fight, I'm thinking that didn't actually connect. A lot of those shots didn't connect. I think towards the end of the fight, Jimmy did connect with a few decent shots, and it looked like it really backed up Jan. But most of his shots in the fight didn't connect. Jimmy's biggest success was when he was against the cage and holding Jan and just clinching and throwing knees at the legs. Both guys were, really patient throughout the whole fight, especially in the first round. Jimmy definitely won the first, and I definitely agree with the decision. But to be honest, it was a really close fight. After the second round, I thought they were one apiece. I think Jimmy won the first, Jan won the second, and going to the third, it was really anyone's game. Jan, what I liked was in the second, Jan really started to open up and counter. He was swaying a lot of Jimmy's shots, those big wild hooks. Jan would lean back, he'd sway, and then he'd come back with his own shots. Nothing really big, nothing huge, just a few kicks and just a few jabs. Unfortunately, Jan, even though he was a big dude, he didn't really have the answer to get out of Jimmy's clinch. Understandable, considering that Jimmy himself is a really, really strong guy. But yeah, look, all I can really say is, if you're going to move Jimmy Manuwa into any kind of title picture, the time is now. And as far as Jan, I mean, I don't think his stock really dropped too much. I think it was a tough fight for anyone in the division. And, I'm really curious to see what Jan can do in the future.
Yeah, that's it. And, I guess it was a case of Jan backing up too much in the fight and giving Jimmy too much octagon control. And I'd love to see Jan look a little bit more offensive in his next fight, because you mentioned, Cass, he did have some good head movement and he did counter with some good punches, but there were actually some opportunities that he didn't capitalize on. I mean, a couple of times he hit Jimmy with some good shots, and I'm like, come on, Jan, follow up with some shots.
Yeah.
Keep going, and that happened throughout the fight, but it was almost like he was just a little bit timid, didn't want to take that risk and pull the trigger, which I understand because Jimmy's just a monster. But I'd love to see him pull the trigger as the next fight and put it all together. He certainly looks like an exciting fighter. Just on the commentary, Cass, I did notice myself feeling a little bit frustrated with the commentary at times. Things did happen during certain fights that the guys didn't cover at all, and things were ignored from certain opponents. I know that Dan Hardy and the other play-by-play guy, they're a little bit green. They haven't been around as much as John Anik and Brian Stan or Goldberg and Joe Rogan, but I feel like they they just didn't pay enough attention to certain fighters, and they didn't go play by play enough in certain fights. And I guess I'm just used to it watching a UFC card, having one guy mention all the big sort of highlights throughout the fight, and it just didn't happen on this card in certain fights. So I don't know if it's going to be something that they'll look at and they'll improve, or, it's tough to have the chemistry that the other guys have or figure it all out. But that was just something that sort of frustrated me sometimes.
I didn't pick up on that too much. Was there anything specific that you remember them leaving out or not mentioning during the fights?
I'd have to go back and look it over, but there were a few fights where they only mentioned the offense of one fighter and they didn't mention the offense of another fighter. So it was a little bit annoying to me because made it sound like one fighter was doing a lot better than another fighter. And that could be very difficult sometimes. People don't realize the commentary for a lot of casual fans will actually dictate what they think of the fight. So I like evenly played out commentary where both guys get a mention during the commentary.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the main event, Cro Cop versus Gonzaga, the rematch. The last one was many, many years ago, and I think this is the fight that really saved this card. If it wasn't for this one, this would have gone down as a really shitty card in general. Yeah. Thoughts on the fight? What did you think of this one, Dennis?
I thought, when I saw Cro Cop standing in the UFC octagon again, it was almost a surreal feeling for me. Cro Cop is one of those guys like Fedor and a lot of those other legends that you sort of forget what it feels like to see them in a fight. And then when they get back in there, it's almost like you go back in time to when you watched them in their prime. That was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool seeing Cro Cop back there. The actual fight itself, I thought Cro Cop, obviously, he's a bit older, and you can tell, his body doesn't look the same as it once did. He looked a little bit out of shape, a little bit slower. One of the weird things I found was he actually moved towards Gonzaga's power hand, which is strange because usually you move away from the power hand towards the jab side. And Gonzaga sort of surprised me because he had Cro Cop in a lot of really, really dominant positions. I mean, he mounted him twice in 2 different rounds. I just don't feel like he capitalized on it, especially in the first round. He really took his time, and then he was just so gassed in that 3rd round. He was taking deep breaths. I don't know if there was something wrong with his training camp. I don't know if he had some kind of injury going in or just acclimating to Poland and fighting in Poland, but he just looked exhausted, and he just looked like a punching bag. I mean, Cro Cop just smashed him with those elbows. It was really impressive. It was impressive to see that he learned from their first fight and wasn't as susceptible to the elbows. And it was good to see him survive in those positions. Overall, I think, like you mentioned, the fight saved the UFC Poland. And as someone that would, if I attended the event or as someone that would have watched the card live, at least it's something that I could walk away from and say, hey, it was worth my time, sort of watching UFC Poland. But what did you think, Cass?
Yeah, I think I'm a big firm believer of all's well that ends well, and I think this fight definitely put a good exclamation point on the event. And I think if I was there in the crowd, this is a really long event. I mean, the prelims themselves are really, really long. That's something. The main event is something that definitely would have woken me up and gotten me out of my seat. As far as the fight, I mean, just a few things that I noticed. Holy shit, Cro Cop going for a heel hook.
Yeah, what was that? That was crazy.
Trying to Gonzaga. I mean, considering Gonzaga hit the left head, the left head or whatever, right high kick. I can't remember which leg he used. I think it was the right to knock out Cro Cop. Imagine if Cro Cop got that heel hook. I was like, holy crap, man. It was really smart of Cro Cop actually peeling the legs off. When I saw Gonzaga going for it originally, I thought that could be it. I was like, oh no, Cro Cop, what have you done and did now? I thought that could have been the end of it. Gonzaga, obviously a really high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. You mentioned before when you see Cro Cop, you have this feeling like watching Fedor. I don't feel that anymore. I feel like Cro Cop has had so many losses now, and he's, a lot of people say that he's a shell of his former self, and I kind of get that feeling as well. So to me, watching Cro Cop back in the UFC, I was like, are you ready for this? Are you ready? And to quote Beyonce, are you ready for this jelly? Like, can he handle it? So for me, it was a big test of like, okay, you can go out and you can beat guys like Ishii and guys on the the indie circuit and guys in Russia, but can you compete in the UFC against even a guy like Gonzaga, who, I mean, he's like top 15 in the heavyweight division. I'm not really sure what he's ranked, but he's still a tough guy. If he went outside of the UFC, he'd definitely wreck house. The other thing I noticed, I mean, really, really nice elbows from Cro Cop, even on the bottom. They were talking about the elbow game of Cro Cop. It's good to see him use that, because obviously in Pride, you can't use elbows. You can do soccer kicks and things like that, but no elbows. So even from the bottom, where most guys don't really dare to strike, and in a lot of cases, it's not that smart. I was really impressed with Cro Cop doing that, and I guess the other good thing about Cro Cop using, say, elbows from the bottom as opposed to strikes, if he's going to throw hands at Gonzaga from the bottom, Gonzaga could easily catch him and turn it into an armbar. So a lot smarter than it may initially see. I was actually really impressed with Gonzaga when he got on top in the second round. You mentioned that he wasted the opportunity. I thought he did well. I thought there was a few moments where he looked like he was going to go for an armbar. And I don't think that would have been the greatest idea because Cro Cop, he's older and, he doesn't look the way he used to, but I think that's just completely natural given that he's getting up there in age. But he's still a really, really strong guy. And I think if Gonzaga did go for the armbar, he may have gotten reversed. Cro Cop may have gotten on top and, maybe put him away and gotten in the guard earlier. So I was actually really impressed with Gonzaga, especially by the end of the second round. I was like, wow, man, it is not going well for Cro Cop at all. And I was thinking, look, if it continues this way, then Gonzaga's clearly going to get a decision. But the other thing I thought in the back of my mind was Gonzaga does have a tendency to gas. So it did kind of look to me like Cro Cop was biding his time and waiting for something. In the past, like fights against, say, Brendan Schwab and Frank Mir, Cro Cop has been a little bit gun-shy. So I was really waiting to see, look, is he going to turn it into something? Is he going to capitalize? Or is this going to be another 3 rounds of Cro Cop not really doing a whole lot? The other thing I was impressed with was when Cro Cop did throw that high kick, that head kick, Gonzaga was really, really well prepared for it. He shot in straight away, took Cro Cop down, and I think that really made Cro Cop, think about what he was going to do. The way the finish happened, I mean, not really many people expected it, that Cro Cop was going to get the finish from the clinch of all places. I mean, I believe Cro Cop had his back to the cage as well. And then on the break, he hit Gonzaga with the beautiful elbow. He hit him with the point, and the second one was more the forearm. And then once he got on top, I mean, Jesus, that ground and pound was insane. Those elbows, really, really impressed to see that. Really impressed to see. They say an old dog can't learn new tricks. Well, I mean, clearly you can, and clearly Cro Cop did his homework, and he's talking about how he did all those elbows and he throw those shots. So, that was really exciting. You mentioned the commentary before. Oh, man, the commentators really marked out big time when Cro Cop won. I mean, I think Dan Hardy out Joe Rogan. People always talk about Joe Rogan yelling and screaming to the mic when he gets excited. I think Dan Hardy has raised the bar now. And Joe Rogan's going to go home, do his homework, and figure out how he's going to raise it even higher. So all in all, it was a really fun way to cap off UFC Poland, and otherwise pretty boring card.
Yeah, and the big move from Cro Cop in that finish that people didn't really look at was that beautiful overhook that he had, where when Gonzaga got hurt, he actually tried to shoot down and take him down, and he moved out of his way and used Gonzaga's momentum to actually angle off, and I think that was very, very smart. If Gonzaga got him back down, it would have been a different fight. And yeah, I agree with you, Kaz. Gonzaga was good off the top in the second round, but he just didn't do anything for a man in the first round. He was just held down the whole time. And I guess if I'm Gonzaga and I get on top and I'm in mount, I'd expect to finish him from there because I know that I'm going to be gassing later. But just in that second round, he did do a very good job. I think if the fight went for 30 seconds more, it would have been stopped because that cut on Cro Cop's face was bleeding badly. And he had him in the S-guard, I believe. So he could have just kept going on that cut. So overall, it was very, very lucky that was the end of the round for Cro Cop. But what about that scar on Gonzaga's face, man, from that elbow? That's some crazy stuff. I mean, Cro Cop had a pretty big cut on his face, but Gonzaga's going to have like a jagged scar going down his face. He'll have to get in touch with a nice plastic surgeon or something. That thing is huge, man. It's massive.
Yeah, that's brutal. I mean, if he wants to go for the gangster look, he should just keep that thing, because that's really bad. Like you mentioned, Cro Cop had one on his, I believe, above his left eyebrow.
Yeah.
When I saw all the blood, I thought Gonzaga's nose was broken again, just like in the Randy Couture fight. Yeah. And then when he was standing there, the other thing to mention about Gonzaga, like, I don't know if anyone caught this, but he had a really hard time getting up. Like, he was down for ages. Cro Cop was already standing with the referee. They were about to announce the winner. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but Gonzaga tried to get up and he actually stumbled. And Bruce Buffer was looking at him. It was a bit of a sad sight. And that's something that I sort of wanted to also touch on. With Gonzaga, I mean, he's had a lot of losses recently. And not only that, but he's had a lot of KO losses. So it's sort of starting to get to that point where, Gonzaga's got to look at his career. And I know he had that resurgence when he came back to the UFC for his, second or third run, whatever run he is on now. And he mentioned how he wants to get back to his roots and really go back to using his high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instead of constantly trying to strike with guys. And I think you know, if you look at him, he's obviously been knocked out by Cro Cop now, brutally. He got knocked out by Matt Mitrione, brutally. And then a lot of his last few losses have been via knockout. So it's sort of, I'm sort of wondering, you know, how much longer does Gonzaga have? And that's the thing. This is a rematch that happened 8 years ago. Gonzaga's been doing this for a long time. What do you think, Dennis? Do you think the end is coming near for Gonzaga, a guy who started his pro career in 2003?
It's a tough one. And I almost feel like Gonzaga just never reached that sort of the peak that people expected he would have. I mean, at one point, everybody thought this guy was going to be the next big star in the heavyweight division. I agree with you. I mean, it doesn't look like he's going to get there anytime soon. I know they'll hold on to him for as long as they can because the heavyweight division is thin, and they always need guys like Gonzaga to match up against the bigger names that just kind of hang in there with the top names anymore. But the thing that I find interesting is Stipe Miocic, he actually beat Gonzaga by decision, and Cro Cop actually finished him. So that's pretty good. I mean, Stipe is a tough guy. I think Gonzaga can get in there with some of the lower guys in the division and still put on a good show. But being in the heavyweight division for that long and being TKO'd that much, I mean, it's a lot worse than if you're in the middleweight division or the light heavyweight division because they really throw hard punches. And I mean, I still remember when he fought Shane Carwin and got that punch to the face and that loss where he almost knocked out Shane and then got knocked out himself. I mean, he's a veteran. He's someone that doesn't really deserve very much respect, or doesn't get it very much respect. I think he deserves a lot more respect because he's really been in there with sort of the best of the best, and either won or lost. He's still been in there, but I do think that his career should be coming to an end pretty soon. I love seeing him fight. I think he's a great guy, but yeah, I don't think he'll be making a run or reaching the peak that fans thought he might have when he was fighting guys like when he was knocking out Cro Cop back in the day and did some of the stuff like that. But either way, I guess it's nice to see him possibly sort of finish out his career in the UFC and not outside the UFC. I guess it's nice they gave him another shot. But I think one more TKO loss, I'd like to see him discuss sort of an exit from the sport. I mean, he's got a school, I think, a martial arts school, and from what I hear, he's a really smart and nice guy. So I think he's still got a lot of stuff to do outside fighting. But in the heavyweight division, being in there for so long, I mean, God, some of these heavyweight fighters only have a few fights before they sort of move on from the sport. So he's an extremely tough guy for hanging in there for so long.
Look, the thing about Gonzaga, and something, I want to get other people's thoughts on. If you're listening on YouTube, definitely drop some comments below. But I actually would say that Mika Cro Cop was arguably Gonzaga's biggest win in his whole career. If you look at his record, I mean, you look at guys like that he beat, like Sean Jordan and Dave Herman. He beat Ben Rothwell. That's another decent name. Parker Porter, Ednaldo Oliveira, Chris Tuckshaw, Josh Hendricks, Justin McCulley. A lot of these guys are, either not, most of these guys aren't in the UFC anymore. And a lot of them aren't even fighting anymore. So I'd say Cro Cop was always his biggest win. And now that he's lost to Cro Cop, 8 years later after, I would say, honestly, Gonzaga has gotten a lot better since that win. And Cro Cop sort of, I don't know, the jury's still out. I mean, you say that he knocked him out, whereas Stipe Miocic didn't. He took him to a decision. I always feel like with Gonzaga, he's always winning until he loses.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of his fights, he actually comes out in the first round, the second round, he actually looks really good. And then around the third round or second at some point, he gasses out and he's kind of his own worst enemy. I feel like maybe if he could get that cardio under control and have better cardio, I don't know what it is. I don't know how he trains. Obviously, he's not exactly shredded, but that doesn't always indicate that you're not in shape. I just feel like with Gonzaga, it's a bit of a cardio problem. Something that you see a lot with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys. Or guys that started off with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as their base. So I think if Gonzaga could get that cardio issue under control, he could be a brand new fighter. But to be honest, I mean, that's been the same problem that he's had for years and years and years now. So I really don't see that changing. And that's the other thing. Once you're gassed, it's a lot easier to get knocked out. When you don't have that oxygen going to your brain, it's just a lot easier to get knocked out. So going off this loss, losing to a guy who arguably was his biggest win over his career, I mean, it's not that great for Gonzaga. And looking at Cro Cop, I mean, he did beat Gonzaga, but let's be honest, I don't know that he would necessarily beat a lot of the guys, anyone elite in the UFC. So I feel like the UFC are going to keep him around for these European shows and, maybe doubling cards, and if they go to Scotland or maybe Russia and places like that. And Cro Cop's still a fun fighter, but I think he's definitely reached his ceiling, in my opinion. The jury's sort of out, but I don't see Crow Cop exactly going for a title run or anything like that. I think with Crow Cop, it's one of those things. I'm pretty sure it was a case of Bellator wanting him and the UFC picking him up just because of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Crow Cop won't be making any title runs anytime soon. And I think it's another thing as well where fans don't want to see him matched up with anyone that can scramble his brains because they feel so passionately about him. And let's be honest, a lot of guys in the heavyweight division would beat Crow Cop pretty handily. And I think Gonzaga almost beat him himself for the second time. And I think it's a great point that you make about Gonzaga. I mean, and a lot of these losses and why I remember him as such a great fighter, like Randy Couture, Shane Carwin, a lot of those guys he almost beat. And then in the very last second, he ends up losing. So it's sad to see a guy that is always almost there, but never quite there. It's a tough one, and I don't know what it would be, Cass. But yeah, if it's cardio, if it's maybe he needs to go train somewhere else or something like that. I mean, it would be incredibly frustrating for the man looking back over his fights and being so close and yet so far at the same time.
Yeah, look, he's never going to be making those championship dollars, so I just hope for his sake that he saved up his money, and obviously he's been fighting for a long time, you know, he spoke to Chris Lieben earlier, and he admitted that he wasn't the smartest guy when it came to spending his money, and then he got a guy like Josh Koscheck, who even though he was at the top of the division, I mean, he was really smart with his money, and he's got at least one Ferrari that I know of, so hopefully the same. Yeah, he's got a Ferrari in the last year or so. Josh Koscheck's been enjoying his life and hunting and things like that. So hopefully the same with Gonzaga and his school. I believe it's called Team Link. I hope that's doing well because, you know, I don't see Gonzaga necessarily competing for another 5 years.
No,
but I do agree with you in the sense that UFC are going to hold on to him just in case there's any new prospects and they want to feed him to them, and just in general because the heavyweight division is so thin.
Yeah, that's it. And if he does go for a luxury car, I'd probably suggest like a Johnny Hendricks truck because I don't see Gonzaga fitting into a Ferrari anytime too soon.
I don't see him in like a convertible.
Too much body hair.
Too much body hair, you know? And on that note, right there about body hair, I think that's a show right there. I don't think we can top that. I think that's probably the best way to wrap that up. And that will be the lingering image for everybody who's listened to the show. Yes. And hopefully you'll join us next week.
Cosby sweater.
Cosby sweater, yes. Reminds me, here we go. Here's another wrestling reference. And it reminds me of A-Train from the WWE. You know? George the Animal Steel. That's it for us, man. That's it. That's another show. You know, big thank you to our guest. Big thank you to Chris Lieben, Don Fry, and of course, a very big thank you to our final guest, the always fantastic Jake Ellenberger. It's a real pleasure chatting to all those guys. We'll be back next week. Before we go, of course, at Twitter, Submission AUS. Don't forget to give us a follow. If you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the channel Submission Radio AU. Dennis, any final words before we leave the guys for another week?
Yeah, I saw Fast and the Furious. I believe you did as well, Cass. Number 7.
Yes.
So cheesy. So cheesy. Didn't really like the way they finished it. The Rock's super terrible in the movie. The script, super terrible. The acting, super terrible. Somehow, at one point, they became a bunch of people who stole cars and raced them, and now they've become 007 or Batman. I don't understand where these people picked up skills to scale of buildings or fight like special agents and beat them up. How the hell does Rodriguez know how to beat up Ronda Rousey? The chick, all she does is steals cars and barely remembers who she is. And especially Iggy Azalea in the movie. It's like, are you kidding me? Do you want to make it any worse? It was tough to watch. The guy from Tokyo Drift looks really, really old as well. Cass, I know you watched it.
Oh, that was hilarious.
It's like they go back in time, They go back in time, and you're like, dude, this guy is so old. Is like he's got like no hairline. He's had a rough life, man. But what did you think of the movie quickly?
Yeah, that dude from Texas, it was funny because they used the footage from the original Tokyo Drift and then they cut to the current footage and I was like, whoa, you thought we wouldn't have noticed that?
Yeah.
Look, I went in there thinking it was going to be the worst movie ever. I was actually surprised. It wasn't that bad. I enjoyed it. I didn't have any expectations whatsoever. I was like, it was a fun ride. But man, the cheese factor, Jesus Christ. Really, really, really cheesy. I believe my girlfriend's words were, wow, Vin Diesel was talked back to life. That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, it's like, stop resuscitating him. What are you doing? I'm going to talk to him right now.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I know. That was ridiculous. Yeah, forget CPR. I'm just going to talk to him. And Vin Diesel was pretty bad in that movie. I mean, I feel like every time Vin Diesel spoke, they turned the bass way up and they also made his voice really loud. Really, really cheesy lines. There's a few moments in that movie where I was like, really? I can't suspend my disbelief to believe that happened. Like, Okay, a few spoilers. So when Paul Walker is running up that truck or whatever bus, it's not like he jumped off the bus and then he landed on the cliff. No, Michelle Rodriguez drove the car, did a slide, and he hung onto the spoiler. And then they focus on the spoiler like it was the spoiler. I feel like in The Simpsons when Homer's in space and it's that green bar, and the green bar is featured in Time magazine. You know, and that in Fast and Furious, it was like, all praise be to the spoiler. The part when they were going in between buildings in Dubai or Abu Dhabi.
Stupid.
That was
stupid.
Really stupid. And then the part at the end where Vin Diesel decides that the best way to whatever defeat the bad guys is I'm just gonna drive my car off the parking lot. And that was his plan basically. And then it just like fell down into all the rubble. And then
what about the head-to-head collision? We're just gonna drive into each other and then get out of the car and fight. And what about The Rock sitting in hospital and just breaking out of all of his casts and stuff? Oh, I'm okay now. And then his daughter's like, go get him, Dad. Like, she'd be horrified. Dad's gotten up out of the bed and picked up a gun and ran out the room. And finally, why does Ronda Rousey have female guards? Makes no sense. What is it, like a secret female assassin sort of like group or something? They're all dressed the same. That Ronda Rousey, I really like her as a fighter. Sometimes I struggle to watch her as an actor. I mean, she's not an actor and she doesn't have much time to do stuff. And I think in Entourage, she has a pretty meaty role, a bit more meaty than this one. But it was just tough to watch that fight scene with Rodriguez. And where the hell does Rodriguez know how to fight from? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, look, Rodriguez is in the FBI, whatever. My biggest takeaway, the first one is and always will be the best.
First one, the third one, I didn't mind Tokyo Drift. I like number 5, the one where they like steal the vaults.
I didn't like that. They're driving through Brazil with like a however many ton vault behind the car. I thought that was ridiculous. I like the first one because it was believable. It was a bunch of street kids and they race cars and that's it. That's all it really was. I like that, and I like Too Fast Too Furious with Tyrese and Paul Walker.
You like that one? I hate that one.
I thought it was fun. I thought it was.
What about
easy.
the part with Ludacris? Like, hey, yo, it's Ludacris.
Yeah. Ludacris has been doing the same movie for the last like however many years they've been doing it. But the biggest contrast is like you go from 2000, they're just a bunch of street kids, and there's so many classic lines in that movie, almost had me, and you got Brian and all that kind of stuff. And then you look now and it's like they're international spies, and I think it was the last one where they had that car and it like flips people over, and there was that like mean crew from Britain and they traveled the world and scaling buildings, and there was that stupid shit where like I think it was the last one where they had that like chase on the freeway, and then like there's something to do with a tank, like they crashed and then someone caught someone with a car or something like that.
There was the tank. Yep.
The tank of '86.
And then the tank went off the thing. Ah, man, it was a scene, man. The dumbest part I remember is like when one chick got thrown from like a bridge, and then like Vin Diesel, I don't remember, like he jumped into the middle of in between bridges, and then like he caught her. I don't know. The whole thing, it's a scene, man. I think they'll do another one as well. So prepare yourselves, people. In the comment section below, let us know what you thought of UFC Poland. Your thoughts on, why not? Your thoughts on Fast and the Furious. Do you think they should keep doing them? Tell us the one that you think is crappiest. That's going to be a tough one for you because we all know which one is the best. And yeah, just let us know what you think about the episode. We love chatting to our fans. Got a lot of awesome comments on YouTube and a lot of great interactions on Twitter. Keep them coming, guys. Me and Cass, we manage those things ourselves, and we love chatting to all the listeners.
Yeah, we'll be back next week with some delicious meaty guests and possibly another movie review. We'll catch you then.